Thank you, Councillor Curry. Any member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon, for your report. I think it's the second version of your report I've read. Just a few questions. Just on EV charging delivery, the report mentions 2.14 million has been awarded. I'm just wondering how many charging points are we intending to install for that amount of money? And are we certain that the residential grid can actually take the additional load that's going to be placed on it? That was on that one. On the waste strategy, can you just flesh out the new technologies on how that's going to change carbon emissions? And I'm just wondering if you've got any comments on your thinking about a future waste strategy and bin collections, particularly given the fact that we are looking very carefully at the work that Medway North are doing for the council, and if you've got any early thoughts that you might be able to share with us on that. And finally, just on bus infrastructure, given the pressure on budgets and how you're prioritising which, I'm just interested on which bus corridors you're prioritising and the reason why you're prioritising those corridors, and how you're going to measure whether these physical changes actually result in improved journey times and reliability for passengers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Corrie, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Lawrence, for your questions. So I'll kick off with the charging on EV delivery. So this is a tricky one to say how many things. It's going to be put together. We've got the funding for it for a limited amount. 2.1 million might sound a lot of money, but it's quite, as you probably know from the way money works and installation, particularly highway works, it's not cheap. So I don't know off the top of my head the numbers of charging points. That will really depend upon the company that's chosen to go ahead with the works. And at that stage, we're still in the early days about who will be going ahead with the works. But I can certainly look into that and find out more information on that. What I can say is that we'll be obviously getting as maximum use as possible. As far as the grid can cope, the answer is, I understand it can. But obviously, again, it depends upon where the power is running through the streets at the moment and stuff like that. So that's a more sort of technical detail about where the power is available on corners and stuff like that when you have to plug the whole thing in. So again, it's a sort of quite a technical area that I'm not completely sort of up to date on myself, as it's outside my area of expertise. A number of other issues around EV charging which are important to note, I think, as well, is that it's not just a sort of Medway issue, it's something that's being looked at in detail through Transport for the South East. There's a lot of work they're doing across the whole of the South East, including Kent and ourselves as well, on that to bring it forward, particularly around vans and the delivery services and stuff like that. As you've probably seen, a lot of local companies are now using vans. The vans, delivery vans are all electric ones, which is really good news, but they do need more charging points. So how that all comes together as well is really important, because they use up a lot of our traffic congestion is caused by delivery vans and such like. And the only other area that's a difficult one is about household charging. And we're getting a lot of emails from members of the public saying, can I run cables across my pavement? And we're saying, no, you can't. And that's causing problems for people wanting to purchase an EV vehicle, living in a terrace street or living in a street where it's not, they haven't got a driveway. That's a problem. And that's another area that we're looking at in a lot of detail and see if we can resolve those issues. Hopefully, I've not been too clear on that one, but as I say, it's technical information that I don't have to have.
If I could just come back on that one section, Chair, whilst it's goldfish brain, or gone my comment. I think that's great. I mean, it'd be great when you're actually doing the procurement to understand how many charging points we're going to get. I do accept the cost of reinstatement and roadworks and everything else, and no doubt compliance and everything else that goes on top will affect that. I do wonder, though, about if we put a lot of charging points in certain streets and they're being used, because you know what will happen, that people will come to an area where they can find charging points. Yeah, that's going to be an impact on residents living in those roads. So residents will make use of them, but your electric taxis and vans will also want to stop and charge as well. So I do think the point about whether the load in the street I know it's a technical question. I'm not expecting an answer, Simon, but just maybe we could flag that one up. Now, I'm just wondering, just on a slightly political question, is given the government have now imposed a per mile charge, is that likely to affect the take-up of electric vehicles, in your view? Thank you, Chair.
Like you, I heard about it yesterday, so I can't really answer that question fully. However, I mean, having said that, I mean, there is no doubt that running an electric vehicle, once you've paid that, because they're more expensive to buy in the first place, once you're running one, it's a lot cheaper than your fuel costs, and then it can be a lot cheaper than your fuel. Potentially, we can argue that till the day comes in. But the thing is that you know, anyone who's running a vehicle has their annual costs divided by 12 over the course of a year, and you can look at it and you make the decisions as how you go forward with that. And the 3p, and somehow we've got to pay for our road infrastructure. I mean, that's got to be paid for, and that comes through various ways. Taxation is one of them, and so I can understand the government's thinking behind that 3p. It makes sense to me. But as I say, I've not looked at it in detail. I know it will add to the costs to a certain extent for people over the course of the year. I think the other thing to understand about EV is that, you know, there is no doubt that EV is the future of transport, road transport in the country, for most countries now. I mean, how we get there and how we manage the electrical the amount of electricity available for that and all the other issues around how we do that, we've got to resolve those. And it's almost a street-by-street approach across the whole of Medway. We're going to have to look at it in that finer detail, really, to really deliver it properly. We're also relying on, you know, you can already see a lot of the fuel stations have now got EV charging points as well and all that kind of stuff. So it's a really complex area. And it's nearly as complex as it was 100 years ago when the first petrol stations were being installed. We've moved on from that. 100 years later, we're now moving to install EV charging. And that's the future, and that's where we need to be investing and promoting, because it's coming, and we need to be ready for it. Just moving on to your other questions, this is about the technology around the waste strategy. Again, this is something, as you're probably aware, we've now got our new fleet in place, which is very exciting. I know that the staff are delighted by the new comfortable cabs and all the technology that goes with those. There's been a comment about, firstly, how quiet they are compared to the old vehicles, because the engines are now just running the vehicle as opposed to running all the kit on the back of the vehicle, all the machinery that runs off there. So that's all electric and it's a lot quieter. So that's certainly having a real benefit. And equally, a lot of the technology around how we manage and process waste is changing fast. There's a lot going on in that area. So the waste strategy now, we're in the early stages of producing it. It certainly won't affect our bin collections. We're sticking with our commitment to that and the weekly collections. There's no change there. But the mode and how we collect and everything like that isn't. There's no plans to change between now and when LGR happens. So we're sticking with those policies. Just one point there. I mean, I had an opportunity to go to the recycling centre in London, where all our recycling waste goes, and the level of technology in there is quite remarkable. I mean, that's where it doesn't, the waste stream, as we talk about, is from the collection point outside people's doors, and then how do you go through? So there are now robot arms instead of people which can now sort the waste, which is fantastic, because I've seen staff in there wearing these enormous gloves to sort through the waste that comes in. I'm going to make this point, and I've said it a million times, please rinse your recycling, because they have to sort it at the recycling centres, and it's horrible if it hasn't been cleaned, because there's a lot of flies and all sorts of stuff going on there. So I would say call out to the public, really, to rinse your recycling out, make sure it's clean before you put it out. But they're now bringing in robot arms to do that sort of stuff as well, which is very exciting. And I think the other thing is that there's a big push now on public perception and public knowledge and understanding of what recycling means. It's actually quite profitable for the companies involved in it. That you get the waste coming in, and the plastics, the metals, the glass, all those recyclable products. There's virtually nothing that cannot be recycled nowadays. There's only a few things that can't be, including our food waste, which comes in next year. And what I learned was, which is really news for me, is that your milk bottle, your plastic milk bottle that you buy in Tesco's or Sainsbury's or wherever, and then when you rinse it out, put it in your recycling, within a couple of weeks, it's back on the shelf full of milk. That's how quick the turnaround is for the process. So when people say, oh, recycling doesn't work, it works, and it works really well when it's set up properly. So just wanted to make that point there. Thank you. And the last question was about the bus infrastructure and corridors. So we've got corridors is at the heart of our bus delivery plans. There's a new local bus infrastructure plan that's we're now working to, and we're also working on our new local transport plan for the whole of Medway, which is due for renewal at the end of next year. The consultation for that has begun. We published our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the LC WIP, earlier this year. All of those are corridor-based, so the corridors are identified in different ways. And that's in close collaboration with the bus companies. We meet with them. I have a monthly bus meeting now, talking through with staff, and we meet with the bus companies on a regular basis to talk through what their needs are. And again, going back to EV, all of them have the aspiration to run EV services in Medway as soon as possible, really, which is very exciting. So, and you've probably seen how that fits in with our local plan aspirations to put a bus hub in at Strood Station and another one out on the Hoop Peninsula in order to service those communities as well with much more efficient and more regular bus services. So there's a lot of planning going into that, and like you say, it is corridor-based from that point of view.
Chair, can I just come back one very quick comment? I suppose it's if we're investing in corridor A, whatever, what assessments are we making that's actually going to improve the take-up of bus routes? Because there is a danger here that we choose the wrong, we don't have a selection criteria, or we make the selection based on other things, like, actually that's good for me, for certain councillors in certain wards. The thing here is these improvements have got to show that people are going to take up, that we're going to increase the bus journeys. I think that's what I'm getting at, is our bus journeys are still below where they were before COVID by a long way. I think we're still about a million plus journeys. So, just understanding the assessment that's being made, if we do these improvements, this corridor, we think, based on all the data that we have available, we'll get a bigger improvement in bus journeys. Thank you, Chair.
You're right. This is a slow, steady recovery from the COVID period when obviously the numbers fell off a cliff. And what we're after is that, I think it's in the is it in the report? It might be in the report. We've got this figure in our climate plan and in our bus plans of 9 million journeys a year by 2028. That's the target. That's way above the pre-COVID target. We've risen this year up to 7.8 from post-COVID time. It dropped down quite seriously. We're now back up to 7.8 million journeys a year. It's kind of tailed off a little bit. The £3 fare has had a little bit of a hit on it, so it's flattened the curve. But I think that'll come through as time goes by. What we do with the corridors is a number of things. Firstly, the major routes, obviously, through the middle of Medway, the A2 being the obvious one, but Pier Road and other ones. The connectivity between railway stations and buses is fundamental, and that goes back up to the Transport for the South East strategy, which talks about connectivity all the time throughout that whole report that was published earlier this year. That's in there, and how we make that connectivity between bus and rail work really well, and hence the need for a Strood hub, for example. And then it's where are our key population centres and how are they served, and where are the key destinations where those people want to go. Obvious ones are the shopping centres, the other obvious one is the hospital, and then there's the school service on top of that. So all those are built into the calculations as to how the corridors are worked out and designed. And that's not just our highways teams, who are amazing, considering there's not that many guys working on these. They do the maths and they do the calculations really well, but that's in conjunction and close working partnership with the bus companies as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon, for your report. Just a few things. If I start, I'll try and go. Unfortunately, I do apologise. I left my laptop at home, so I've got doing between my phone and some printed notes. But street cleaning and recycling. I happen to be walking around my ward today, and I think the streets are in a complete mess. There's litter everywhere, and then it's not being cleaned up. I do see the Scarab come round, but they are very, very strict. The other day I actually spoke to a Scarab and a truck driver, yesterday in fact, saying because someone had left some sort of a bigger bag of rubbish, and they said, there's nothing to do with us, we only do the curbs. You know, he could have easily picked it up and put it in his, but they, you know, so I do think that sort of waste, road cleaning and things, it seems to be a little bit disjointed, and what can we do to improve that? Because it's just not good enough. On the household waste cycling centres, when will we be able to get booking on the day for the next hour? I mean, it started the next day, we moved to the next morning. If you try and book a tip slot at 9 o'clock in the morning, the earliest you can get is the afternoon, there may be no one coming at 10 o'clock and the place is empty. I just don't understand with today's technology why it can't just say we have 27 slots available an hour or whatever it is, and if any of those aren't filled, you can put it. So I'd like to get some commitment that you will look into that and try and make that happen. Yeah. Public transport. Interestingly, I had some parents complain to me that my ward is quite a large conurbation of houses. I had some parents complain that there wasn't a bus available to get their young people to Mid-Kent College. They have a choice of either getting there at 7:30 or 9:15 when college has started. The bus in the middle apparently is being used to transport children in the Isle of Grain because they cancelled the 116 service or there isn't a 116 service. So I'd like you to look into that, because if we're going to try and get people to actively use buses, then surely somewhere like Mid-Kent College and the hospital and the universities, which that service, you know, we should be targeting the right times, not just say, oh, this doesn't fit in with our bus, and the guy came back and said, well, if it's, you know, it costs money, we can't do it, sort of thing. And I just don't think that's good enough. We've got to get a strategy that looks where the demand is, and maybe they did run it and it wasn't very busy, but because it's not there, people don't use it. It's a sort of field of dreams type scenario. What else? I'll probably have got some more, but let me just quickly go to my phone. The EV chargers. I did go to a meeting, I think last year or the year before, where they said that they were going to try and put 154 EV chargers in around Medway out of the money, and they were going to be 7.5 kilowatt chargers, which meant that people would have to leave their car about 8 hours to charge. It would be far better, in my opinion anyway, to have fast chargers that people could turn up for half an hour, sit in their car, wait for it to charge, or 45 minutes, and then the next person get on it, and then the next person. So I'd like to understand what the strategy is, if you're going to go for 7.5 kilowatt chargers that take 8 hours all around the street, or you're going to provide fast charging stations, because I believe that fast charging, personally, that would be a better way to go. And finally, Deangate Ridge, where they're going through the phases, is there an actual plan to ensure you finish that off rather than just phase one? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hatwell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hatwell, for your questions. So, if I could just go to the booking system on the HWRC first, if you like. I could just pass over to Paul, because he can pick up on the technology side of that, and I'll come back to that as well myself once Paul's here.
So that is one of the projects that we're looking at and proposing for the member task group that's looking at Member 2.0, Medway 2.0, because it's looking at the relationships between Medway North that run the sites within waste services, the digital teams, the service design. So I think that would be a good proposal for the task group, and that's one that we're proposing to take forward that would then be delivered very quickly.
Thank you, Paul. We'd like to...
Yeah, thanks very much. And just then picking up, I completely agree. I mean, I'm a regular user of the HWRC centres, and I find them incredibly valuable sort of asset to our community, apart from the fact that they're free, which is really nice compared to other authorities. I think the urgency of the booking, it's a good point. And I mean, I've, you know, as a user myself, I've, you know, been, you know, normally try and book it the day before or even a couple of days before, if I'm aiming at a Saturday to pop down and that kind of thing. I think the one thing that I would pick up on that is in terms of customer satisfaction, which is really high. I mean, I don't know what your own experience of that is, but certainly the feedback we get from members of the public on the surveys we've done on that is incredible. The staff are really helpful. They even come and empty your car for you. I've had that happen to myself once or twice, where they'll come and help you carry stuff out. And they'll certainly answer all your questions on where to put things, and there's always a friendly smile and a bit of a chat with them. So there's a whole load of really positive messaging coming through there. And that, I think, is key when it comes to recycling rates and stuff like that. Our recycling rates are around about 37%, which is really poor. We should be up around 60% for an area like Medway, and we're not. And how we address that is part and parcel of the waste strategy going forward. And the use of the HWRCs and how they're good they are at recycling almost everything is really valuable from that point of view. So certainly, that's something that, just to sort of say that publicly, if you're to recognise how good they are at the moment. But it's a work in progress, like you say, on that one. Just in terms of street cleaning, I agree with you. I mean, it is a problem. It has been a problem ever since I've lived in Medway for the last how many decades, and how we address that. Part of the problem is sort of that ingrained dirt. We do these deep cleans in key areas, particularly the high streets and stuff like that, on an annual basis. But they only last for so long, and certainly it's only once a year with that sort of thing. The other problem, and I've said this on a number of occasions, is the use of black sacks for our waste. Every time people put black sacks out, then they do get ripped open if they go out the night before by whatever cats and foxes and such like, and that causes a problem in terms of litter. I have that problem in my own ward in Luton, and I think part of it's not so much to do with the public. Often it's HMOs that are an issue in the urban areas. And it's the way that people sort of treat waste as a simple thing, just to get outside the door, not worry about it. I can forget it. That's not. We need to change that cultural mindset really about how people handle their waste in terms of black sacks and stuff like that, and get people to recycle much more.
Just come back to two things on that. One is, this is not necessarily the fox and cat sort of ripping the bags out. And this is just general litter that's been there for weeks, and it just doesn't get dealt with. Secondly, I went to report it, and reporting litter is a really archaic way of reporting litter. The website asks for a postcode, and if you don't actually live in the street or whatever, how the hell do you report where the litter is? It's ridiculous. So I'd like to understand, if you can, if there's going to be a drive to add litter reporting to the report it bit, and maybe Paul could answer that before you answer the rest of the questions.
Yes, that will be covered in the migration of the forms that we're doing. Yeah, absolutely.
How long will it be before we get it?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. By the end of March is what we're aiming for. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Hopefully that covers that one for you. On the public transport issues, again, you make a really valid point there. We've done surveys and we're asking the questions. We know that it's a problem for students in particular. The university students have also said we really wish the buses were better, and we know that's an issue for Mid-Kent College as well. And so what we have got, though, obviously at the moment, pre the bus bill going through Parliament and all the franchising issues around whether we have a mayor or not, all that kind of stuff, that's not going to be resolved in the next couple of years, at least for us here in Medway. So we've got that balance between commercial and subsidised routes. And the subsidised routes are the ones that we feel are essential, and we're always reviewing and looking at those and saying where can we make improvements to those and how we deliver those. On the commercial routes, that's out of our control. That's up to the bus companies to run those. So as I say, I have regular meetings with bus companies and I have regular meetings with the staff involved, and that's something that's always under review. So I can certainly take back that point about Mid-Kent College is not news, actually. And how we deal with that. So I can certainly take that back from the comments you've just made. Going back to the fast charging issue on EV, that's a tricky one. Again, I was saying to Councillor Lawrence about, we need to know how much power is available, and the technology for EV charging is quite fast moving. So I think you might be referring to stuff that's been talked about in the past but has now moved on. So I'm hoping it has. As we go out to procurement on the delivery of our first tranche of proper street charging. I'm sure that's a consideration in the officers' minds, but I'll make sure it is, and I'll take that in there as well. And then the last point you made on Deangate Ridge and the delivery of the programme. This is one of my, as you know, Country Parks is where I started in Medway, so getting that right is I'm passionate about that one. We've got a brilliant new friends group out there who've already, as you know, been planting trees. In fact, there's a task on the 3rd of December, if anybody's interested, on going out to see if the new trees we planted earlier this year are in good condition, and putting up the stakes and things like that to make sure they still are. I think it's the 3rd of December in the morning, so if anyone's interested in turning up for that, it's key, yeah, definitely deliver that. We've got the funding, we've got the contractors are in place, there's a really good landscape team, the Green Spaces development team have worked hard on this to get us to where we are, so I'm very confident this will go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie. I have Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Curry, for your report. Before I get to my questions, I just want to reiterate the point Councillor Hackwell said about the waste sites. Firstly, your praise for the staff there. I'm a big fan of our recycling centres in Medway. I've been to all of them, and they are operating at a really, really good standard. So if you could pass on our thanks to the staff, that would be greatly appreciated. Of course, it does make absolute sense to have the ability to book a slot. You know, I've turned up before, having been frustrated I can't book a slot when I want to go to find it's empty and then turned away. So that is something that can be addressed. My first question is about net zero procurement requirements. So your report cites a lot of information about a green agenda and net zero agenda and doesn't mention the word affordability once. So can you confirm if the Council's climate emergency declaration or procurement plans in general have provisions that prevent local contracts going to local providers at the cheapest price? And are there any barriers in terms of net zero or climate requirements that people have to meet, businesses have to meet in order to obtain contracts with Medway Council, please? The second question I have is around the bus shelters. I'm pleased to see your use of the bus service in improvement plan grant funding. In my previous job, I had a hand in ensuring Medway got an uplift for that funding. How much does these living roof shelters cost? And crucially, can you confirm that all existing bus shelters are improved to a good, decent standard before we start upgrading shelters to living roofs, which I'm assuming are understandably more expensive than typical roofs? I say this because in Prince's Park, have a couple of shelters that are in a very bad condition that could do with a facelift urgently. The third question evolves around the green flag for the Capstone Farm Country Park. 2 points on that. The first, do you foresee any risk to the green flag status of this park as a result of the Council's decision to approve additional house building in that area on the Capstone Valley? And second, given that it is a recognised park for disability accessibility, particularly because it's for fishing, for example, can you please resurface the footpath? Because as the condition of the footpath currently is in that park, you cannot push any wheelchair around the lake because the path is just, it needs completely redoing, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Councillor Corrie, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lammers, for your questions. So I will certainly pass on your comments about the waste teams at the HWRCs. And I'm going to be visiting there fairly shortly, actually, so I'm going around them, so I will pass those on. As far as net zero procurement is concerned, this is a balance between a number of factors. Obviously, we have a duty of responsibility as a council to procure any services that we have, large or small, or local or wider, in terms of the quality of the service that we're after and the value for money. Those are the big factors that always affect anything that we do in terms of procurement. The bigger contracts obviously are decisions made by Cabinet and such like as well, and certainly the senior staff are fully aware of those. We then also have an additional responsibility, both in terms of our social responsibility and our environmental responsibilities, which come into the procurement decision making. The weight given to each of those is really dependent upon, you know, the priorities, which are value for money, and the quality of the service. Those are the big ones that really matter more than anything else. Personally, I would like to see more weight put on the environmental ones, and I've talked to the procurement teams about that and how we might achieve that. But it is always a balance between what we're doing best in terms of the value for money that we're after for the public purse. So I think I'd like to reassure you, and that goes back to the social side as well. We have these social responsibilities. So if we know that, you know, for example, we don't want to be buying stuff that's been imported from China that's coming out of a sweatshop or something like that. I'm not suggesting China has that sort of thing, but or any part of the world. We need to be careful about that side of the social responsibility that we have over that as well. So it's one of the factors that's in there. That's why it's in the climate change plan to make us more aware of that responsibility. Having said that, I think that as time goes by, there'll be less and less concern about that, because more and more companies who provide services for local authorities have their own climate agenda plans and everything else like that. So we're seeing that increasingly. We see it through, particularly, for example, through the green grants that we hand out. The numbers of companies applying for those has gone up. We've got more money available. It's not a huge amount, but we do give these grants to local firms who want to adopt green practices. And they provide a little summary of how they're going to do it and what they're going to do and how their company is going to provide it, and then we give them a small support grant in order to achieve those. So, and that's a really successful scheme that's been running for a few years now. So there are more and more local firms who care as much as we do about the environment, and they want to do their bit. So as time goes by, it'll become less of an issue and more of the norm, if you like, that people want to do that sort of work. I hope I've covered your point on that one. With regards...
So, Councillor Lammers, would you like to come back? Or? You can come down.
Chair, just to come back on that first question, obviously the reason why I asked that is because I don't think anyone is against sort of looking after our environment in general, tree planting, public space, etc., etc. But I was surprised to discover that in the climate-related procurement rules as a result of the climate emergency declaration at KCC, that they actually had contractual arrangements that penalise local providers. And as a result of those things being cancelled, they've been able to reprocure certain services and saved £32 million of taxpayers' money over the next 4-year period. Now, given that later on this evening we're going to talk about a potential forecast £10 million overspend, it shows you how significant these kinds of monies can be. So I just want to make sure that in Medway's context, we're not doing the same kind of thing.
I'm not really. I don't know what the KCC climate procurement, I don't know the details of that, so I really can't comment on that at all. I'm confident that we don't do that in Medway, because obviously, as I say before, we've got these primary responsibilities over how we spend our money as public responsibility, and that's the value for money and the quality of service. This is why that's the lens through which I look at it. And then in addition to that, there are regulations and there are sort of around the social and the environmental issues as well, which we build into the thinking on any procurement. Hopefully that covers it. Yeah, I'm confident that we're not spending money on that sort of thing disproportionately, if you like. Okay. Just moving on to the bus shelter issue. This is a very exciting area of work. Obviously, we do have a programme of bus shelter replacement, which is ongoing, and each one costs X number of pounds. I don't know exactly how much money each bus shelter costs off the top of my head, but with the green bus stops, these were a grant that we got, and there's going to be 20 of them. I think there's 10 have been rolled out so far. And there's a few more to come, and they're brilliant. And the new bus shelters that we're putting in also, we're building in the capacity for them to have real-time information screens as well, which are coming hopefully by next year. We'll start to be able to install those. We're just working through the details of how that can work, and that will link into information provided by, going back to an earlier question about reliability of buses, people will have not only real-time information like you do at the station, you know how many minutes till your train comes, that will be available at the bus stops for the buses, but equally on your phone you can have an app which will tell you the same thing. That's where we're working towards on the buses. And it's quite exciting, actually.
Chair, just to come back on the second question, if I may. You said about grant funding. My understanding that the green roof shelters are coming from the same pot, the bus service improvement plan grant. So not a ring-fenced additional grant just for green roofs. Essentially, it's a spending decision within the existing envelope. So hence my question was about, are we ensuring that we're levelling up all of our shelters before we're going bespoke and extra special on some?
As we work through the replacement programme of shelters, we're making all of them as green as possible. That's kind of the thinking behind it. So yes. And you mentioned about the green flag for Capstan. Obviously, the country parks and all our 8 green flag sites get those on the merits of the site itself. So the new developments that are taking place in the Capstan Valley shouldn't impact upon that. So it should retain its green flag, presuming we keep the quality of the park at its best going forward. I'll come back to the developments in a moment. Just resurfacing the footpaths around the lake, I'll raise that with the staff and make a point of that. I wasn't aware of it until now, you told me, so I can do that for you. In terms of the housing developments, I mean, this is a really difficult situation we're in. So, as you are aware, and as colleagues are aware, the Lidsing development is in Maidstone, and that's happening. So we're doing our best there to work very closely with Maidstone Borough Council on the infrastructure delivery service. We're working on that for nearly a year now with them, and it's hard work to get the infrastructure right. We've lost 2 planning inquiries in the Capstan Valley already. One at Gibraltar Farm and the other one at East Hill. The East Hill development now has started, and you can see the houses being built from the country park. And I worked there for 10 years. It really, it's quite tough on that. We could see from the way the planning inspectorate and the responses on those 2 public inquiries that if we weren't to give a certain amount of development in our local plan in the Capstan Valley, we would just simply lose more public inquiries, and it would cost the council a fortune. So in the balance of things, we've had to go with some more development in the local plan in the Capstan Valley. And that's not in terms of just sort of, we were frightened of losing inquiries. That's also in terms of how we are supposed to deliver 24,000 homes for Medway, 24,500 homes for Medway, which is the target that we were set by the previous government and the current government. And in that delivery, we made very clear in our local plan, we gave the public options. Would they prefer intensive development in our urban areas alone? Would they prefer that great spread of development across the Greensfield sites alone, or would they prefer a mixed approach? The mixed approach was the most popular one. It was a difficult one for people anyway. And that 40% brownfield, 30% urban fringe, and 30% greenfield spread of development was the one that has been put forward and planned based upon the public consultations. We carried out 2 Reg 18s and a Reg 19 consultation, and that was the responses we got. So we went with that decision, and that does mean that instead of putting 12,500 homes out at Who, it's about half as many going out in the Who area. But where else do they go? We've been looking at the west of Strood, east of Rainham, and in the Capstan Valley to take that balance on those greenfield site developments. It was really difficult, and I, as I say, I worked in that area my whole life, pretty much on and off, and it's not easy. But that's a decision we were put in the position of taking.
Thank you, Chair, for the questions and the comments. Just to come back on the last one, if I may. Obviously, we understand the pressures with regards to the local plan. Of course, I refute the figures requirements to build given out by government, including I also refute the formula that the national house building planning formula is based on, particularly because by 2031, our population will actually be lower, is estimated, than it is today. So given that a lot of these houses are going to be fully online by the 2040s, it is strange that we are basically bricking over our countryside in the Medway towns for a native population which is actually demographically on trend to go down rather than up. But irrespective of that, I think given that it's green flag, given that it's one of our flagship parks, it's really important that officers crack on and completely resurface that path with tarmac so that everyone, whether it's elderly people or disabled people, can get wheeled around or walk around that park freely because they are unable to do so at the moment at all. Thank you.
Thanks. Can I just mention one thing? I'm a bit concerned about the population figure that you quote there, 2031, the population. The Medway population is already going up quite quickly. It's 292,000, I think now is the latest figure I heard. We're expecting, certainly with the new housing development and generally migration in of people from other parts coming into Medway, the population will probably go up by about another 50,000 over the lifespan, the 15-year lifespan of the local plan. So population is going up on that one.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. And thank you for your questions, Councillor Lammers. Councillor Shaka.
Thank you, Chair. So I think I may have asked a similar question at some point in the past, Simon, but I think under the current climate, it's quite appropriate. So it was based on the work yourself and the climate change working groups have done, where there's any activity aimed at countering misinformation about climate change. There seems to be a significant amount of right-wing propaganda and climate denialism out there, especially with the rise of Reform Party. Also, is there anything specific we could do for public office holders who are entangled in anti-science misinformation and propaganda, many who seem to quite easily fall down these type of wormholes, being on a number of current important topics?
Chair, point of order, please. I'm just wondering how Councillor Shokar's question actually relates to Councillor Curry's role as a portfolio holder.
Would you like to clarify?
Yeah, I thought this comes under the climate change and the climate change working groups.
Councillor Shokar's question is very political, and this is not supposed to be a political committee, Chair.
But the misinformation is from... So the misinformation
Thank you,
from
Councillor Shaka. I think your question will be answered. Thank you. Councillor Curry, can you respond?
Thank you very much.
Speaker, please.
I'll try and keep the politics out of my response by simply going back to data and facts and how that looks. So on a global scale, the figures are obvious to 99.9% of the scientific community see climate change and have recorded it in detail. And our satellites, which are run by the most amazing technology we've ever created, are recording that week by week as we go by. So to say that the planet isn't warming as quickly as it is, which is frighteningly fast, and to say that the forest fires that are hitting southern Europe and North America aren't there is crazy. So we had 4 heat waves this summer. We've never had that before in this country. And to say that the ice caps aren't melting as fast as they are is crazy, because the data shows that they are. The River Medway, since the late 1990s, is now 19 centimetres higher than it was back in the 1990s. Right? That means that the average tides are coming in considerably higher than that as the tide comes in. The actual river itself is higher. And as the tides come in, and then on the spring and autumnal tides, it's coming up and it's topping up and it's coming up in the Pentagon Centre. And there are 4 major flood points in the centre of Strood, which we're very concerned about. Medway City Estate, we're having to rethink how we do that completely, and that's demonstrated by our approach in the local plan, because again, businesses are wanting to move off there because they can see the water lapping up and it's coming up the drains there. So to suggest that climate change isn't happening is from data point of view alone, is nonsense. I think as far as the misinformation is concerned, I think we've seen that there is some vested interests who would rather keep their profit margins clear for this year and next year and aren't too fussed about the following years. We see that at the COP conference, where the overwhelming presence of oil and gas companies is kind of swamping out any possibility of debate on the key issues. And to leave fossil fuels out of it is crazy again, because the science is saying the primary cause of climate change is fossil fuels. So there is that sort of, and that's not a political lobby, that is a commercial lobby. They are interested in their profits for next year, and that's really all they're concerned about. So I think there are a number of issues there where we can say the misinformation and any denial really is not. And I think one of the other things I would say, and this is something that we see, and which brings me a good heart, and I think we mentioned it a little bit also, is that I don't know hardly anybody in Medway who doesn't accept that climate change is real. We've got a fantastic, there's only a few, we've got a fantastic community climate working group set up, which has representatives from across our community, and they are working on, they've just done an energy subgroup to look at how we deliver community energy projects that are net zero and stuff like that. The community are wanting this. They want to see the improvements coming. And that's our institutions like the MOD and the Army and the Royal Engineers, it's the hospital, it's the Mid-Kent College, it's the universities. They all see it and they want this to change. And that's where I get my sort of feeling of goodwill from the community on this. So I don't think it's going to matter too much what some people think at the end of the day. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Councillor Nestorov.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Curry, for your report and for basically everything that you do, because reading the report really shows that we have progressed in so many different aspects. I have two questions. Some of my questions were actually already asked, but I'm going to expand on that. So my first question is about bus travel. We saw that the numbers of people using buses have risen from 3 million to 7.5 million in 2024 and 2025. Do we know which programs and how did we engage with so many people, and how did we make them or encourage them to use buses? And can we
Sorry, through the chair, if you wish to speak.
So obviously there is a massive change, almost more than 120% since Labour took power. Do we know exactly what programs have stimulated people to use buses more? And the second question is about EV chargers. As a EV car user for almost 2 years now, I must say, when I charge my car, 99.9% I use my home charger. Very, very, very rarely I would use another commercial charger. So having a 7 kilowatt chargers in front of neighborhoods and buildings that don't have their drives makes much more sense. Obviously, it's good to have fast chargers, maybe 1, 2, 3, or 5, maybe scattered around Medway. But having much more smaller chargers for me makes more sense for people that don't have drives and not accessible, because they will be the ones being used every day. Just wanted to say that on that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nestorov. I think just going back to the bus travel and the engagement, I mean, I don't know if the emails arrived in people's inboxes now, but we have our active travel team, which is a cross-party group and involves external groups and organisations as well. We meet several times a year, and the report that comes to that group is a sort of summary of all the active travel initiatives, and it should be landing in people's inbox, the latest one, any moment now. So keep an eye out for that, and that gives a good picture of the various initiatives, not just on buses, but on walking to school and all the other active travel activities that go on across Medway over the last quarter, really, if you like. And so I would certainly, when that arrives, please read it. I think just in terms of the initiatives we've taken, what we're trying to do, we're talking about, and it goes into the EV charging issue as well. This is about a cultural change. We've talked a little bit about the housing numbers for Medway over the next 15 years in the local plan already, and all of us suffer from it pretty much at least every week, if not every day in some instances. The congestion of traffic is horrendous. not doing anything about that is not an option. How do we get people to stop driving so much in Medway and reduce congestion, both from a community perspective and a health and well-being, from an environmental perspective in terms of pollution, but also in terms of an economic perspective? Because if we don't sort out congestion, that impacts on the economy. So the various things we're doing to encourage more people not to drive is about all those three factors: the environment, the community, and the economy, and how we improve those. And in order to achieve that, on the buses, we've done a number of things. Firstly, we meet with the bus companies and talk with them. The £2 fare was fantastic. It going up to £3 has, I mentioned, has had an impact, but we're hoping and we're lobbying hard. Government, don't put it up anymore, please, because it's working and it has worked really well. So we're doing our best on that front, so that cheaper fare, make it affordable, make it reliable. So we're talking to the bus companies about reliability. I think there's certain initiatives we've taken which have improved reliability, the red routes being a good example. That's certainly reduced the bus delays in town centres where they've been put in, and that's really helpful. I think the other issue there is the free bus programme that we've been running, paid through by our bus subsidy that we get every year from government. That's encouraging families in the holidays and also people shopping at Christmas, for example, to take a bus rather than drive. And that is about a cultural change. It's telling people actually getting the bus is a good thing to do. It's an easy thing to do. And if it's free, obviously, it's a nice thing to do, but that's the next generation of bus users for children growing up and finding buses are easy to use. If you look at what the buses can do now, you can plug your phone into the seat, all the other stuff that goes with it. As I say, the real-time information boards that are coming next year will be really good help, and an app and all that kind of stuff. Those are the initiatives that we're doing to encourage that greater bus use. It's working, numbers are going up. We just need to keep that steady pace and increase going. The active travel group has been really successful. It's certainly engaged with a lot of people across the board. It's only been running for 2 years, but already it's starting to have some major impact. And a good example of how that's working is it Greenacre School is the 5th highest in the country for children walking to school, and that's in the last couple of years. So fantastic, that's what we want to see.
Thank you, Councillor Corrie. And thank you for your question, Councillor Nestor. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to concentrate on the title of Councillor Curry's portfolio, the strategic element. I know that besides clearing litter and repairing footpaths, there is a very strategic role that you have, Simon, and the first part of what I wanted to say, Chair, was more of a comment than a question, although obviously I'd welcome anything that Councillor Curry wants to say about it, and that is that members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee may be interested to hear that I've seen at first hand the tremendous amount of work that Councillor Curry has put in on the local plan. And whilst we've a long way to go in terms of needing an examination in public, etc., I think we should be pleased that we've made significant progress, the Reg 19, the full council debate, that we are progressing from a situation where we didn't have a local plan since 2003, which was leading to all sorts of speculative development. And obviously we look forward to that process being completed, but welcome the progress that has been made so far. I particularly wanted to focus on another cross-cutting area, and there are so many of them, the climate change and so on in Councillor Curry's portfolio, but I particularly wanted to focus on the active travel and build on what has just been said as a result of Councillor Nestorov's question. I wonder how we can extend beyond schools to the wider Medway community. It's great the work that's being done with schools at the moment, and I agree with Councillor Lawrence. These topics tend to come up at various committees, but I think the health aspect and other benefits from active travel are important to highlight. So I wondered what work was being done in terms of the private sector, the voluntary sector, when we work with our partners outside the Medway Council. We're not only cross-cutting within the council, but are we working with these other partners to encourage them to have more flexible working, perhaps, encourage their staff in turn to walk places rather than or take the bus rather than go by car. So it's that sort of area I wanted to explore. I wonder if you had any comments, Councillor Curry, because after all, just wrapping up my remarks in response to what Councillor Lammas said earlier, I think there is a correlation between value for money and good employers and satisfied staff. I mean, if the staff are satisfied and they're healthy and they're encouraged to work flexibly and walk and take exercise, this surely must lead to better companies that we deal with in the bidding process. Without widening the question too much, I wondered if you had any thoughts, Councillor Curry, on our relations with the private sector in terms of active travel, etc. initiatives.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jones. I think you're covering, and thank you, Chair, I think you're covering quite a broad area of issues there. I just pick up on the local plan. Obviously, it's something that we set up our hearts on back in 2.5 years ago when we came into the administration, that we would try and get one in place within the first period of our administration. We're on that journey. We've reached that Reg 19 submission stage now, and I think and just for the purposes of this committee in particular, the economic benefit of that already is starting to show, to bear fruit. I think the certainty that a local plan provides after many years of not having one is really beneficial to our local businesses and stuff like that. It gives them that surety. I mean, a good example will be the way that our Developers Forum has really responded to that. So every year we have this Developers Forum meeting now, and they come together, and they come together in other parts as well. And, you know, I've done some sort of personal work with them as well in terms of attending seminars and stuff like that, and attending sort of podcasts and things like that as well, in order to show the business sector and the developers themselves that actually they can find surety of investment in Medway, and that's what this is about, that inward investment thing. And some of my colleagues are more engaged with that than I am, and I know that the leader is, along with Councillor Marhill as well. So getting that surety for business, and the local plan is a foundation for that, because it really does provide that. So that's one area of benefit that's come out at the strategic level. Another one is about identifying our employment sites much more clearly and being very certain about taking them forward. So the IPM site is now settled, and we've got really good engagement going on there, and we're reaching that next stage of going out to promote it again after all the issues we had to deal with. The legacy that we were left of that site is now been resolved, and we've got things happening there now. Kings North is another one where that progress is now being made. We've got some really big interest out of the Kings North site, which we're very excited about. So identifying those and other areas as well for in sort of investment on a larger scale, those strategic sites, if you like. And I think you're absolutely right. At the heart of those, that goes back to our travel issue, is about the how do we get the workers there? So each of our sites now, we're talking regularly about travel plans with business and employment sites and stuff like that, and how they work. And those travel plans are key. One thing we don't want, for example, at IPM, is queues of cars driving in and out every day. I mean, that wouldn't work. So we're already talking to the people interested there and the bus companies about how we provide a decent bus service in and out there for local people to go to work locally. And I know a few people who work up at the BAE site, for example, who, I mean, they'd love not to drive there if the buses were available, and that's something that we're working on. So it's about making that link between travel and the local economy, and I mentioned it a few times now, making that work. Going beyond the schools, as you say, and I think that we've certainly got a lot of interest from the universities. I mentioned that before, Mid-Kent College, on how we make the improvements there, and we're having those conversations. The other area on the travel, and this goes back to the schools as well as generally in our communities, is health and well-being. You probably are aware, everyone's aware now of our Marmot Place position there, and we've got plans around how that works, and Professor Marmot's been here and talked to us about that, and we've launched the Marmot Initiative here in Medway, and a lot of that is about how we minimise the impact on our health services. At the moment in our primary schools, I think it's up to 1 in 6 children going to primary school have got an inhaler. That's just shocking, and that is going to be with them for a large part of their lives, and we need to stop that from happening. And the only way to stop that is to get people walking and cycling and not driving and get the pollution out of it. All those factors that go towards lung health in our community, we need to stop that from happening. It's no good. If you look at the impact of school streets on the community, it's fantastic, to be honest. If you look at the areas where we've got our school streets in place now, and how nice it is for the children to walk to school compared to what it was like. My school in Luton, which is on it's not even a main road, it's a B road, but it's a really busy B road. We've even put in a lot of traffic calming along there over the last 4 or 5 years in order to help with that. But equally, those 600 children at Luton Primary have to walk along that road and in through those gates every day, and then walk out again into that traffic. And that is just not good for anybody's health. And we need to stop that somehow and make it better for them. And that's what the School Streets Initiative is all about. And the more, the better. And there's some places in London, I think Hackney's got over 40 school streets or something like that now. And I'm not suggesting we could have that many, but I certainly think we should be looking very closely at how that works. And we are looking at it, simply because the next generation's health is so important. As for the current generation's health, equally. I mean, we've got a lot of elderly people, we've got a lot of people who've already got compromised lungs, and they do not want to be breathing polluted air. So I could go on more about that, but I think I'll stop there. But thanks for the question.
Thank you, Councillor Jones and Councillor Corrie. Thanks for your response. Before I come to Councillor Printer, just one from me. Now, it's good, Councillor Corrie, that the government have adjusted the decision to see more pensioners in Medway who may have been on the breadline qualifying for the winter fuel allowance. My question is, what is being done within your portfolio specifically to address fuel poverty through energy efficiencies, improvement in existing homes, and especially in regeneration areas? And following from that, what approach are you taking to ensure effective and inclusive public engagement on both the climate emergency and major regeneration proposal, especially with vulnerable or disproportionate affected groups?
Oh, no, it's there. Got it. Thank you. So that's a really important question, actually. I thought for a minute you were asking me about the question about the economy, but which I'm not very expert on. But certainly on the when it comes to things like fuel poverty and how we tackle that from a climate perspective, it's really important. So just to give you some picture of it, so trying to think where to start really. So if you look at our own properties first of all, so we've got the HRA board, which you sit on, and you've seen the work that's being done there and how important that is in terms of if you can source your energy from sustainable sources and it's cheap, that's really important. And that's not an easy thing to do. The prices vary quite considerably, but certainly if you've got the capital to install solar panels or air source heat pumps in properties, then that is always going to be a plus, because once they're installed and you paid for the initial costs, then the energy is cheaper because it's coming from the sun and from the air, and it's free in that respect. So getting those initiatives underway, the retrofitting of properties is key, and we're looking at that very carefully for all our own properties under our HRA account. So that's one area. I think the other area is then how do we take that model of what we're doing as a benchmark and show it to certainly to the other social housing providers. I know there's a lot of interest from MHS. I've spoken with them. They would love to see retrofitting go on in their properties. And I think they own about 12,000 properties across Medway as well. So again, and a lot of their residents are vulnerable, elderly, vulnerable, whatever, that kind of thing. And so there is certainly the willingness to do it, but I think they need to be helped along the way to get there, and that's where the HRA team can really make a difference because they're available. I've invited them to attend our climate change working group, community working group, in January, so they're going to come along if time allows within that meeting to talk to the community working group on that, and that includes people like MVA are there, and there's the Army there with their property portfolio and stuff like that. So there's getting that message out about how it can be done within the community. And there is a cost issue. I think if you look at the price of a new boiler, it's between £2,000 and £3,000. The cost of an air source heat pump is about £17,000. So you have got an issue around how that's managed and how you pay for that. And you're looking for government support for grants and things, certainly in the social housing sector, to help provide with that. And we may have to do it at a slower pace, but having a plan to implement it and get it in is the first step on that journey of how we deliver on that agenda, if you like. So in terms of, I'm just trying to pick up a couple of other things. Certainly in terms of the vulnerable people and stuff like that, that is key to how we're doing it, and it fits in again with our marketplace. Can you remind me of any other question you might have had in there?
Thank you. I mean, you cover most of it, but what I'm missing from this is the reason I mentioned winter fuel payments and or allowance and so forth, and fuel poverty. You may have, I know the work that's been done with HRA and the council on stock, because I sit on that governance board. But really, I'm talking about people who own their own property and may just be on the breadline. What are we doing to ensure that they don't fall through the cracks?
Okay, I mean, that kind of drifts into our cost of living plan and stuff like that, which you see in the One Medway council plan that we have, and how we deliver that. And it covers areas in sort of this adult and social care side, which I'm not particularly expert on. But certainly in terms of the energy side of things, what we've done, there's two sides to that really. One of them is working very closely with central government. So the government publicised its net zero carbon plan for the urban areas of the UK in December last year. And within that plan, they identified the need for local authorities to be the organisations that close the gap between the energy companies who are providing net zero energy, net zero energy sources, and the investment needed for that. And we've been working, we signed up a declaration that we signed a few months ago to sign up to commit ourselves to working on that initiative with central government. A number of other local authorities across the UK, like Bristol and Glasgow, and I think Coventry is another one, Leeds might be another one, have signed up to it as well. They took that list of local authorities, I think it's about half a dozen of us, over to the New York Climate Week, and we got some global recognition for what we're committing ourselves to do, and that's under the control or the management or the leadership of Lord Rees and Kerry McCarthy, the climate minister, who are doing that, and their role is to talk to the private sector funders of various sorts, and our role is to sort of invite them into Medway to deliver those programs. In the context of that, we've got a number of initiatives that we're looking at. There's the Solar Together programme, which has been running for a number of years in partnership with Kent, which has been very successful. We've got quite a lot of homes in Medway now have solar panels as a result of the Solar Together initiative. We're looking at the heat source pump issue and how we can deliver that at a more affordable rate and stuff like that. But the other really exciting area is the river source heat. We've done the initial work on that, was done a couple of years ago, with regard to was the energy available in the River Medway to provide river salt heat network for the centre of Chatham, and it is. So how we take that forward is a project we've discussed with government, and we're looking at how we get the private sector to come and things like that. And there are partners who are very keen, including the military estate and the dockyard, and one or two other partners in the Chatham community are very keen on seeing how we can deliver that river source heat pump network. And that's already been done in other parts of the country. It's not new. It's technology that works, and it's already delivering heat and electricity into the communities in other parts of the country, and we can do it here as long as we can get the funding to do it. And that's the next bit, and I can't do that alone. It's working with partners, obviously, to do that. So there's a number of things that we're doing, and that energy then, I mean, once it's installed, it's a lot cheaper for the communities that are in those areas.
Thank you, Simon. Just one more from me regarding funding, as you mentioned. So what key external funding stream are we currently bidding for to deliver this climate and change initiative?
Again, you're touching an area I know a little bit about, but not a huge amount, but it's about the private sector pension fund organisations like L&G and the other ones, Aviva, those sorts of organisations. They're very keen on the government's Great British Energy Company and how that's going to work and what's involved with that. So I'm stepping outside my comfort zone in terms of knowledge of economics on that one. I'm much more comfortable talking about climate change data, if you like. But in terms of how that's funded, that's the kind of area that the investment funds, if you like, come in and do that sort of thing. But again, it's something that I don't know a huge amount about.
So do we have a climate change budget?
What, for the council? We've got a smallish one. It's not massive. I think that, I mean, I don't know if Phil can help with the size.
So we've got, in terms of the climate change budget, there is a team of, I think, 3 full-time employees, or most of them might be part-time, which are the designated climate change team and work solely on that. The rest of it, like grants and that, tend to be kind of within the services and bits and pieces. It's very hard to pull together in one complete picture. We have tried in the past, and we can revisit it. But in terms of the specific resource, it is just that climate change team.
Thank you.
If I may, thank you for that. It's really helpful. So if I may add to that, the role of that team is primarily about how we promote the climate change sort of message, if you like, and technical support throughout the council internally, and we do that through various initiatives, and also into the community. So that team, for example, is responsible for running the climate change community group and getting the message out through them. And if you think about an organisation like MVA, for example, if that team can provide MVA with information on climate, that goes to a huge part of our population straight away through the social media and stuff like that. So that communication role is a key one that team delivers.
And they do kind of keep an eye out on kind of what grants are available and kind of point them. So if there's a grant for, I don't know, some team in kind of related to bus services, they will talk to the bus services team to say, can we apply for this kind of grant? Or in housing, they'll talk to housing about what grants they might be able to apply for. So they are quite active in trying to source that funding, but it's quite a murky picture to kind of navigate, I think, is the honest answer.
Thank you. We don't have a budget currently. Councillor Printer.
Thank you. Just following on from that point, that it's great we're doing these big things and it's great we're getting them grants in because we need them to deliver what we need to deliver. I'm assuming they're being used holistically across us as an organisation to make sure we deliver climate change in each department. Them small changes do add up. On the point, Councillor Hackwell, of finding the system we use is a bit archaic. Now, I remember before 2019 there was a great thing called Love Medway app. It was great. You could almost walk down the road without breaking stride, take a picture of something, got your location and fire it in. So if we get something back close to that, that would be great. Now, I know we've had a bit of an obsession with EVs, but lots of my wards don't have drives. I know you did touch on it there briefly, Simon, but I'm getting inundated with emails by residents who want to take part in these workplace schemes, which is a great benefit, even with the 3p charge per mile. The benefits of the workplace schemes to get an EV vehicle, but they're not able to really take that on because they don't have drives or the confidence. So I understand that you're getting these charging points put in at £2 million, but there are lots of companies out there, quite innovative companies, that's no cost to the council, that's the person pays that company either through a subscription or an upfront fee, but you need agreement from the local authority. Where are we going with that? Have we got a strategy? Are we engaging with these companies to get a scheme in some part of Medway? Across the whole of Medway would be great, because one of the schemes is you haven't even got to use the one that's outside your house. If that's busy, you can actually use one somewhere else if it's the same provider and log into your home energy prices as well, which is a key because they are quite expensive if you use the other chargers. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mark. I mean, I think from the point of view of working across the council, that's certainly true. Getting all the council sort of departments and areas of and teams engaged with that, that's a big part of what the climate team do. We also have the Climate Change Board, which was set up, I think it was just earlier this year actually, and is now meeting, and that's the senior management. It's chaired by Adam Bryan, and they look at it, all the heads of services look at how they're delivering climate change across the whole spread of the council, and that's become very successful. And the climate change team, report to that board. So that's how that structure works, and it's starting to really sort of have an impact now as well. I think the other thing is about awareness raising amongst our council staff. So just getting the information out to the teams at every level makes them want to engage with things more, and that's certainly having a result. I mean, internally we recycle a huge amount of what we do now, and that wasn't taking place a few years ago, and it is now. So it's really starting to have an effect, almost to the point where being aware and conscious and doing something about our climate impact is the norm, as opposed to something new coming in. So I think that's really starting to happen. Hence the need for a refresh on the action plan, because that work has been done. It's become much more normal to do these things, so we refresh the plan, I think. And actually, interesting enough, the first priority in the climate action plan is knowledge and empowerment, telling people what needs to be done and how it can be done, and then showing them how to do it as well. That's a key priority within the action plan, so that's happening both internally and externally. As far as the EV issue is concerned, you're really touching a very difficult issue. I mean, I think I mentioned this is a street-by-street approach. How you put cabling across public highways is a real challenge, and something that the team are looking at in detail. But it's literally, you can't have cables draped everywhere because it just wouldn't work. You therefore would start digging up pavements, and as soon as you start digging up pavements, you get up with the maintenance, who's responsible, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a complex area. Other local authorities are trying it and trialing it. But it's not something we've done yet, and it's something that we need to look at carefully. I think speaking with the team about this, they would rather see where does it work best before we risk doing it in Medway, because if you get it wrong, it could cause all sorts of problems in terms of who's responsible for the highways, how's the insurance side of it work, and the cost of doing it, all that kind of thing. There's a lot of issues involved there, and it will vary from one street to the next as well. So I'm not suggesting I've got an answer to that one at the moment, I'm sorry.
Thank you. We'd like to come back, Councillor Printer.
Yeah, I totally understand that, Simon. A lot of these is buried under the street. There's things that come out of the pavements, all sorts. It's quite innovative, and it is what's coming next. You know, we dug up our streets for city fibre. I see this as the next one. We've got the infrastructure for the internet. Now we need an infrastructure for EVs and moving forward with that. So thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to respond to that, Councillor? No. Great. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. So it's been 6.5 years since Medway Council declared a climate emergency in response to the IPCC's report, all data-driven and evidence-based. and a desire to create a clear action plan to address climate change, aiming for net zero carbon future by 2050. I was disappointed to hear the fundamentally short-sighted and misinformed anti-net zero rhetoric coming from some quarters this evening. However, the reality is that climate change at local government level is not a cost, but is a substantial economic and public health opportunity for us. So on that basis, I've got 3 questions for you tonight. How is the Council reviewing our investment strategy and supply chains to ensure they align with the net zero climate objectives we have, specifically regarding any continued investment in fossil fuel industries within the pension fund we belong to, or our procurement processes? That's the first question. Second, Scotland and Wales have government-backed centralised advice and support services like CARES and the Welsh Government Energy Service that provide hand-holding support and development loans to community energy groups. This is a critical gap here in England. What specific dedicated internal resources is the Council allocating to support cooperative and local community energy groups to overcome the significant technical, financial and legal barriers they currently face? And then the third question follows on from Councillor Prenter's. How is the Council ensuring that climate change considerations are built into the everyday decisions of every department, from highways planning to adult social care? And can you provide a clear recent example where a major decision in a non-environmental department was changed specifically due to climate impact? Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll try and tackle this if I can. Just picking up on your first question, a couple of things, and it might be that Councillor Jones is possibly better placed to answer that question than I am, so I don't know if Mark wants to pick up that one in a moment. I would say, in terms of the investment, obviously that's something that's always under constant review, and whenever there's an opportunity, we will look at that. But if that's okay, Chair, I can pass over to Councillor Jones because he's directly involved in certainly in the pension side of things.
Councillor Jones, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I think probably all I wanted to say at this meeting, I'm grateful for the opportunity, is that the pension fund will be setting up an investment subcommittee in the new year. There have been various changes recently, including in taking on a new asset pool partner named Border to Coast, and clearly in developing a lot of our climate change approaches, we'll be working in close concert with that asset pool. The government have laid down a system whereby there'll be 6 asset pools who will be advising on the determination of investments. So in terms of Kent, we'll be setting up a subcommittee early in the new year to discuss responsible investments, etc. I think for the purpose of this meeting, Chair, that's probably all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Hopefully that covers that point for you.
Yeah, but on our procurement, where we have direct impact.
Again, I think I've covered that a little bit in an earlier question, but obviously in terms of procurement, there are strict rules around how we procure, and those are changing with time, and I would love to see them change more quickly and be more favourable, but at the moment we are within the guidelines of that procurement. There is the social and environmental implications of procurement which are taken into consideration, and that kind of gets me to the limit of my knowledge on that area, if that's all right. So that's one. On the community energy, I'm more confident here. I think in terms of how we go about community energy, we've got a number of really exciting things. I mentioned this initiative by the government to bring forward urban zero carbon by 2030. It's a really ambitious target. I'm not sure it's doable in Medway by 2030, but it's certainly something that we want to try and work towards, and we've kind of committed ourselves to doing our best to do that. And the most exciting part of it, which I find most exciting part of it, is our community working group which has grasped the nettle on this one. They've set up a subgroup just to look at energy delivery in Medway, and they've been working hard. They've just advertised and been hugely successful to recruit a new suite of volunteers into the subgroup to look at how we can set up our first community energy program for Medway. So that includes people who work in the sector. It includes a couple of academics who volunteered their time from the universities, and one or two other people who've got extensive knowledge about how we deliver energy at the community level that's net zero. That group is now meeting for the first time in a couple of weeks' time, so that's a very exciting position to be in. And it's not just our climate team who are involved with that. We've got members of the Regen team as well working with us on that, who have a great deal more knowledge about the funding side of things than I could possibly do. So really relying heavily upon those staff members to help us support that. So it is something that is really starting to move forward at a pace on that one. And to be honest, if another group wants to start up and do something similar, they'd be welcomed with open arms, I think. And I know that we've got two very active eco-hubs in Medway, one in Rochester and one in Raynham, and they're very interested in this. They're represented on the community working group anyway, but I know that they're very interested in this area. So there's a lot of sort of goodwill for that kind of thing going on, and we're now taking it forward to the next level. As far as the everyday decisions are made on climate and such like, I think I sort of covered that a little bit by saying the new refreshed climate plan with its 5 priorities, that is kind of embedded now. If you look at if you go to the back end of this refreshed plan, it lists all the strategies that have been consulted on across the council, whether it's in our people side of things, in health and well-being and adult and social care and all that kind of stuff. It also covers all the place stuff that we do. It is now more normal for people to actually say, well, we take that into consideration. Our committee reports now have all that statement on the climate implications. It's not perfect, and I keep being grumpy to officers, you need to make this better and make it more clear what the climate implications are of the reports that you do, but that is happening, which is good to see. And I think in terms of specific projects, certainly in my area, obviously the work that we're doing around buses and sustainable transport and the active travel group is a very active area of interest, and we're rolling that into the community. I've met with Arriva, for example, and they would love to have electric buses moving in Medway as soon as possible. And I've spoken, and there's another company, New Venture, who've actually been running electric buses in Medway and trialling them, and they're fine. They have to charge them down the bottom of Bluebell Hill, which is a pain. But when they run them up here, they can run them in and out of Borstal and places like that without any problem. So we already have electric buses on trial here, which is exciting. So that's where we're making a difference. I think the other area where we did quite a fundamental difference was the delivery of the new Cossington Park Leisure Centre, where we looked at the energy consumption of that building and we said, actually, we can do this a lot better. And the developers did, and they did a brilliant job. So that's really somewhere which has, and we're doing the same with Gun Wharf. We looked at the original Gun Wharf things and we can say, actually, this can be better, and it's going to be a lot better. Now, the river source heat network is going to help tremendously with that as well. So there's a lot of decision-making now based around that, and I mentioned as well that we have our climate board, which is chaired by the Director of Place, in order to look at all that in much more detail. So.
Thank you very much. It's great to see that we're heading in the right direction. Fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. I don't have any other member. Vice Chair, we have a recommendation.
Okay, I move recommendation at page 23. The committee is asked to note the report.
Is that supported? Agreed? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Corrie. Moving on, that brings us to agenda item 6, the One Medway Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary, Quarter 2, 2025 to 2026. I ask Paul Boyd, Chief Information Officer, to introduce the report. Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, this report sets out the performance against the One Medway Council Plan, indicators and strategic risks.
Sorry, Paul. Thank you. Okay, carry on, Paul.
The report shows one strategic risk that's changed and shows the 4 performance indicators relevant to this committee. Following previous feedback, we have included an additional appendix, Appendix 3, which shows some richer data because they're annual figures. We didn't have the data for all of the quarters, so there's a glimpse because this committee looks at performance. It shows what the performance measurement could look like in future reports when we develop the new system that we've been discussing. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report. You note that you can move to a more granular and chopped up reporting mechanism for 2026-27. I just wonder why it takes that length of time to get to that stage for reporting structuring. Perhaps it's the data points that you're being asked to be judged on is the problem, given that most of them are annual. But my question actually pertains to something that was demonstrated in the example of how these new reports could look like, and I would refer your attention to on the appendix for the one Medway plan, page 52 in the report pack. It basically says that this year the amount of incoming phone calls to the council is down by almost half compared to a baseline level in 2019, and it says less is better. Why does the report state that the assumption that less phone calls coming into the council is better? Why is less person-to-person communication considered providing better service? And when there is clearly no equivalent uptick in online traffic to equate for that, what does that say about people not having their concerns addressed and the council not being contactable?
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Paul, would you like to respond?
So that was a particular measure around call reduction. So it was chosen in isolation to look at the call reduction because of the work we've done with content on the website. The digital traffic has increased across the council since that baseline figure. So we have seen those increase, but it certainly doesn't reflect not dealing with phone calls. It's not something we want to turn off. We want to use the technology to support dealing with those residents that need to make those phone calls. But we have seen since 2019 a massive increase in digital traffic and digital transactions. We use the baseline for the calls for 2019, but we compare the digital traffic to the last couple of years. We don't go back that far for the digital services, so I can understand on the charts, if we were to compare that back to 2019, we would see that massive difference.
Thank you for your answer. The issue, Chair, is about the assumptions that seem to be baked in to the report, which is a concern to me as a member of this committee, that lower is better in terms of reduction in telephone calls. I understand work streams designed to improve the efficiency of online service reporting, on accessing council services online, but I have no idea why the assumption is that less phone calls is better. My personal experience this year and that of a constituent that contacted me recently was that lots of phone calls to all different council departments are now being fielded by a central hub, whereby you have a non-specialist, non-officer actually field questions to decide if people's concerns, including my own, are valid or not, and they're serving as gatekeepers, protecting officers' time from hearing the concerns of hard-pressed taxpayers directly. I think that is wrong, and I don't like the assumption in this report, and I'd like it to be raised. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yeah, it was only the lower is better purely relates to that individual indicator, relates to call reduction. That's why lower is better for that indicator, like some of the others. It just clarifies the direction of travel, because when there's lots of charts in a report, it's not always clear which way the target is going. So for this particular target, lower is better. But, yeah.
Phil, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So, objectively, in terms of efficiency for the organisation, it is more efficient for us to deal with these queries online than via a call centre. Now, what Paul's saying is that the total volume of customer contacts and inquiries hasn't gone down. There's a channel shift. But both options are still available, and the fact that customers have chosen to go for the online option over the telephone option, i.e. the more efficient option, is a positive thing in my view.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure that the overall engagement with the council has gone up in line to compensate for the drop in telephone calls. I don't believe that's supported by data in the RPAC, and if you have the data, I'd welcome it. The point is, in my experience, that people are getting frustrated. Their calls are being handled by non-specialist officers, by, what is it called, Customer Hub? What's the term? Does anyone know? Cabs. Customer Business Support, okay? And in my personal experience, they decided my concerns that related to me personally were not valid, so they didn't actually pass them on to the relevant department. I've had that reported by constituents as well, and I've had to then go and raise them with portfolio holders to have their concerns addressed. So it is not good to assume that things that are online is better. In fact, it's not about efficiency, it's about quality of service for the people that are paying our taxes. They deserve to be able to pick up the phone and speak to their council.
Thank you, Councillor Lambert. Phil, would you like to come back?
Yeah, just very quickly. So if you have got some specific examples of customers that are unhappy with the service that they've received, let us know, let Paul know, and we'll address it.
I appreciate that, and of course, as a councillor, we're here to seek redress of grievance, but that is not a substitute for the function of a council that should be accessible to their taxpayers. And calls are very important for people who are not digitally astute, and people also often prefer to talk over the phone to the council to raise their local concerns rather than going online, and that option should be maintained in my view.
Do you have a recommendation, you said?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to move a recommendation that we note that telephone calls lower is better is not better, and that the council should always maintain service provision and accessibility for people who opt to speak over the telephone as opposed to just online. Online should complement, not replace.
Is that supported? It hasn't been supported. Paul, would you like to come back?
Yeah, I think if we were here 4 or 5 years ago, we were talking about, as a council, digital channel shift, and that was the conversation at the time. And I'm really pleased that we're not talking about that anymore. We're not trying to force residents to use the phones, to use online services. We're making the online services better, simple. We're finding residents are choosing to use those, which is reducing the call numbers, and that's what we're seeing. But there's no intention to reduce that service. In fact, the technology will support that service.
I'm sorry, but this new call handling centre is a novel concept that's introduced recently. It was not the way that we used to do things, and it's also not good. They should not have gatekeepers.
Councillor Lammers, do we have a point of order?
Yeah, it's not a new service. This is a non-discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. It is not a new service. Councillor Hockwell, will you?
Maybe this is for the work programme, but at the moment we don't have any measures that we can actually scrutinise. So why are we looking at things that we can't actually scrutinise? Maybe we should just only look at this report when data's available. That's the first thing. Second thing, I had an experience. I phoned cabs this week. I found a local lamppost that was bent in half and the wires were exposed. It's right next to a park. I made one call. Took a few minutes to answer, but that was a lot better than I've experienced in the past. And the next afternoon or morning it was dealt with and made safe and all the rest of it. So it does work. I normally choose to use digital, but I chose to use the telephone because I was out and about and it was a lot easier. So it's a choice that I consciously made. I liken it really to, you go to the supermarkets, you get either self-shop which is a digital one, or you can still get the trolleys. You can still get a cashier to do it for you. And that's exactly what the council are doing. It's giving personal choice. Most people choose to use the self-shop. And I think that's exactly the same what's going on in the business. Cabs is not new. It's been there a long time. When I was responsible for it, 7%, I think, of the phone calls were people just ringing up and asking how much council tax they owed. So we worked on making it available online so people could just log on and look at it, so to stop those phone calls. So it's not all about just having a phone, someone at the end of the line. It's actually targeting what the most important things to do are. And that was one of the things. But why would you have 7% of your phone calls saying how much I owe for council tax? People can now log on and look. It just makes life a lot easier. So I support what cabs are doing. And you know, the reduction in telephone is not so we exclude it completely, but it should be a reduction as people get used to new technology and things are made easier. So that's just my view on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Before I come to Councillor Bowen, did you have a recommendation? Or
no, I don't have a recommendation. I was just saying that, you know, it is a service, it's not new, and we have been reducing it for many, many years based on the fact that we are switching people to digital when they prefer to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if you're not happy with the service you've got on the phone, if more and more people use the phone again, that service is probably going to get worse because those people are going to be very, very busy. Personally, I'd far rather deal with a computer than an actual human being, but yeah.
Thank you. Any other member? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations at page 33. 1, members are asked to consider the Q2 25-26 progress of the performance indicators used to monitor progress of the Council's priorities as set out in Appendix 1 to the report. 2, members are asked to note the strategic risk summary as set out in Appendix 2 to the report. And 3, members are asked to consider and provide feedback on the example of a future possible reporting style shown in Appendix 3.
Is that seconded? Councillor Printer. Is that agreed? Okay, that brings us on to agenda item 7, is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Round 2, 2025 to 2026. I will now ask the Head of Revenue Accounts, Dave Reynolds, to introduce the report. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. So this report was presented to Cabinet on the 18th of November and summarises the budget monitoring positions that have been considered by Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted by budget managers for the second round of budget monitoring for 25-26. The overall reported overspend across the Council is 9.948 million, which was an improvement of 1 million from the position reported at round 1. Within that overall overspend for the Council, for the areas that are in the remit of this committee, are an underspend of around 1.1 million. I won't say more than that at the moment and open up to questions.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair. On page 62 of the report, it states, under Section 114 of the Local Government Finance Act 1988, the Council's statutory Section 151 officer is required to produce a report commonly known as an S114 report if it appears to him that the expenditure of the authority is likely to exceed the resources available to meet its expenditure. Given that your report states that we have a forecast budget overspend of almost 10 million and that, and I quote, an overspend on that scale generally predicted would all but wipe out the Council's general reserve, do you think that this Council is currently at risk of a Section 114 report? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Dave or Phil, would you like to respond?
I'll
Phil.
I'll take that one as the Section 151 officer. We're always in this position at this time of year. We're forecasting a level of overspend because based on the expenditure profile at this point in the year, that's what it's pointing to. But that's then the catalyst for the organisation to take management action. And regular watchers will know that by the end of the financial year we've reduced that down. At this stage, I don't expect us to be in a position where we will have insufficient reserves to fund any overspend should there be one at the end of the year. So, no, I'm not expecting to have to write a Section 114 report. The other thing I'd say about the Section 114 report is that all it is a tool for me as the Section 151 officer to make the organisation sit up and take notice if I feel they're not listening. And at this stage, I feel like the administration does understand the issue and is working with officers to take the necessary action so that we're not in a position where we can't afford to pay our bills at the end of the financial year.
Given that you have confidence in the officers, in the council's current financial handling of matters, do you therefore think that there will not be an overspend by the end of the financial year?
I'm not prepared to say we will definitely finish the financial year without an overspend. Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't seen the management action that's come out of the management teams yet. I suspect there's a significant risk that we will still overspend by the end of this financial year, but we do have reserves to fund that. There's the 10 million. I'd rather not go beneath that 10 million. But we've also got about 30 million off the top of my head of earmark reserves. Now, I've said before at these meetings that some are more earmarked than others. So some of our general fund reserves are earmarked because they're specific ring-fence grants, and you can only use them for the purpose for which they've been allocated. Others we've made a choice to make. So, for example, IT renewals fund reserves, that sort of thing, or reserves to fund building repairs and maintenance. Now, we could make a decision to use those, declassify them at the end of the year if we so needed to do.
And then finally, Chair, if I may, to come back on that, given the situation that we are in, do you think that it would be sensible for the council to increase council tax at the next financial year to cope with this onset of pressures?
Yes, I do. I would advocate, and I do advocate, that we should increase council tax to the maximum flexibility that we have under the referendum rules.
Thank you, Phil. And thank you, Councillor Lammers, for your question. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions. Just on the noting the 350,000 pressure on the benefits budget, am I assuming that once everyone's on universal credit, that will disappear and that won't be repeated? No. Or is it some of this is related to the temporary accommodation situation and some of that is unsubsidised?
Thank you. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yeah, it's not as simple as that. If the trajectory was that everyone went onto universal credit, then yeah, eventually we wouldn't have that pressure. But there are certain cohorts that will never go on to universal credit. The main one and the biggest cost to us is those that are in supported accommodation. That will always remain our responsibility, and there are other categories as well. But yeah, and they're the most complex ones and the ones that least attract 100% subsidy. So we're always going to have that pressure.
And is that just because the level of the cost of their accommodation is above certain caps? Is that how that arises?
It's a couple of factors, but the biggest one that drives that in that particular cohort, the biggest cost is where people are placed in registered accommodation. We do attract full subsidy. Where they're in non-registered accommodation, we don't. And that's where the big pressure comes from.
I recall this. Yeah. I mean, it strikes me that we need to get the budget right on that, don't we? Because once we're at that position at the end of the current year, we know those people in accommodation. It's a bit worrying that we continually are balancing off these overspends against reductions in staff, which technically could imply impact on service for certain clients as well. That would be my only concern there.
Would you like to come in, Phil? Yeah.
So actually, when you look at the draft budget, which is the next report, we have reflected that pressure in the draft budget for next year. But it's like temporary accommodation, like social care, like care for kids. It's a reactive budget, and we set a budget based on some assumptions at the beginning of the year, and they don't always come to pass.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just two other questions. Deja vu on legal services. We're back with another deficit. I think last time I sat on this committee it was 531,000, which we had to plug. I remember that number. And we're now 231. That is a never-ending problem of we can't fill the vacancies from what I'm reading, and then we're having to use a lot more external providers, which is all the time hitting our costs. I mean, surely we need to take another look at this and find a solution, because I just wonder how much the legal services budget has gone up since the administration took power.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Phil, would you like to come back?
Yeah, so I'm not inside the detail of this, but there's two factors that drive that element of the legal services budget, and it's the bit that's primarily about dealing with children's care cases. One of the elements is about whether we can recruit lawyers and to do it. So there's a premium that we have to pay if we have to fill those places from locum staff. We have increased the salaries, and that's already seen a little bit of a move for people that were on locum contracts to actually join substantively. But the other issue is just the demand. The number of cases that they're having to deal with means that there's also a pressure in terms of we just need more of them.
Okay, I mean, that's probably more of a question for children and young people, isn't
I think it really is, yeah.
But, I mean, from reading between, those cases arise because parents are taking action against the council on things like EHCPs, for example, and placements, and we breach the 20-week rule, for example, but maybe we could make a referral to children. I'm sure they're discussing it, but anyway, I've just got one more question. Probably, I'm hoping Paul can answer this one. There's a £137,000 pressure on software budgets. Paul, on software budgets? So just the question is that because the hike in licensing fees, inflation, I've seen this in my own business where the cost of licenses are going through the roof, or is it because we're having to buy more licenses? What's the balance of that overspend? Thank you.
A bit of both. So we have seen inflationary increases beyond what we would expect and what we'd budgeted for. That budget is all of the software licenses, so we centralised them a number of years ago, so it's all of them in one pot, which makes it difficult. Some of those overspends are where services have added additional features and add-ons to the licence, which have been offset by savings in staff time.
Thank you.
My own experience in my own business with 20 people is they want extra features, they use it once and then they never use it. So I'm just wondering, the question really is about what's the assurance that actually we are, where people do ask for an upgrade, Power BI is a classic one, for example, everyone loves Power BI, that actually we make sure that they are using it and that we continue to monitor those licence costs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so the procurement board has representation of ICT on that board, so any applications for new software, additional procurement is scrutinised by ICT, both for the security elements, but also, do you need it? Have we got another solution that might already do it, which has happened on a number of occasions with what we've built within the tenant that we have. So, yeah, it is scrutinised, and then it still has to go through procurement boards and through that gateway process.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. It says that there's a big risk because of interest rates and EFS rates, not the same as PLW rates, etc., etc. When will we have a detailed plan to understand what those risks are? Because it's going up and up and up, financing our borrowing. And I'd like to understand what those are, especially around the cost of capital, working position, and we know that EFS is more expensive than loans from other councils, etc. So I'd like to understand that. With the finance and business improvement, a lot of the savings or the underspend is due to lack of people or having vacancies that we haven't employed. How is that impacting us achieving Medway 2.0? Because every time Paul promises something, it's by March. So I would like to know, if we haven't got all these people, or if we had the people that we budgeted for, would we actually be delivering something a little bit earlier? Because it's no good just saying, oh, we can save money by not employing those people and then not delivering what we should be doing. So that'll do for two questions to begin with. Thank you.
Thank you. Andy, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I'll answer the first part of your question, if that's okay. So, and we'll discuss this, though it forms part of the budget bill for 26/7, but in this case, we come up with a Treasury strategy which goes forward around the same time as the budget. We have to make projections on what we think the possible capital spend will be, what interest rates may be, and we base the budget on that. But as Phil said earlier, things don't always come to pass. I think where we are at the moment is we've got a large capital spend going through. There's some very big projects happening right now, which involve quite large amounts of borrowing. And then on top of that, interest rates haven't moved down quite as quickly as we thought they might when we put the budget together. So with that in mind, there is more work going on, and as we pointed out, there is a potential risk. But again, we are monitoring that all the time and working with our Treasury advisors with the best advice that they can give. But obviously, projections on interest rates are real difficult because they're not just UK-based. Things are affected by global issues and things change all the time. So we can only work with the best we have at that point in time. But obviously, things are quite pressurised at the moment. I thought.
Thank you, Andy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I confirm mainly the vacancies within the cab service and where the budget's been set at the middle of the grade, and a lot of the staff have just gone through Medpay, so that's where the bulk of that figure comes from. The vacancies within ICT, there is difficulty recruiting to some particular posts within the development team and front-end developers, but we are using contractors where we need discrete project work done. We're filling those vacancies, so there's no gap in capacity within those teams. If it's the same question, it'll be the same answer, yeah.
Are you content with that? I don't have any other members, so just a couple from myself. I want to touch on two things, really, exceptional financial support and income revenue generation or revenue stream. So the first question would be, what's your projected reliance on exceptional support, financial support for 2026, 2027, and whether we now have a detailed plan to reduce or eliminate the need for EFS in subsequent years. So that's the first question on EFS. And on income generation, just interested to know what other streams of revenue are we focusing on, be it commercial property or fees or charges. I mean, have we got any new revenue streams that we will be targeting in 26, 27? Dave, would you like to respond? Yeah.
I can start, Phil, and you can add to anything that you feel needed. In terms of the EFS request, obviously the budget is set, assuming the use of the £18.2 million worth of EFS. As Phil said earlier, the aim is to reduce the current forecast of £10 million and kind of fund that as far as possible from either kind of earmark reserves or the management action that's going to be put in place between now and the end of the year to bring that down. If that doesn't happen, and Phil might want to correct me here, then I suppose the two options are that 18.2 million could be extended to kind of 22, 23 million, say, potentially if it's like a £5 million overspent. Or it could be that we find enough management action reserves to kind of to mean that we don't need to use any more than that 18.2 million. And in a kind of a really good situation, you'd find more than that, and you could bring it down and decrease the use of that EFS. But obviously, that is quite an unlikely scenario. We'd say, given Phil's response earlier as well. So,
Phil, add to that. So Dave's talked about the risk in the current year. For next year, the draft budget currently shows a gap of 26 million. Obviously, work is ongoing to try and bring that down, and we've got a round that we had RCE this morning, and we've got a round of budget meetings over the next week or so to identify further action to reduce that pressure. The other variable that's uncertain at the moment is the financial settlement, and I won't really know that until about a week before Christmas. If I'm completely honest, I think although we're expecting the settlement to be fairly positive for Medway, most of that positivity is already baked into the draft budget. We've made fairly optimistic forecasts already, so I'm not expecting that to be the get out of jail. And on that basis, yeah, there is still a significant risk we'll need to request the EFS for next year. Now, in terms of your question, Councillor Tajan, about have we got a plan for exiting EFS, the big advantage that we should get from the settlement this year is that it will be a 3-year settlement. So we'll have certainty over our funding, certainly the grant funding, for the next 3 years, and that better places us to know exactly what it is we've got to achieve as an organisation over the next 2 or 3 years in order to come out of EFS. But at this stage, we've still got those variables to, and then we've got well, two. Yeah.
Chair, if I just from the budget yesterday, it appears the government are going to pick up the slack on SEND funding, which is not then going to fall on the councils. But the downside is a lot of that's going to come directly out of the schools budget, which may cause a bit of an issue for some of our local authority controlled schools.
Yes, so you want to come in, Phil?
Yeah, you're quite right, Councillor Lawrence. The issue for me really is that Medway, unlike a lot of its peers, hasn't got a massive problem now. We went through the safety valve programme, and our accumulated SEND deficit is largely under control. We're now in a stage, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, where we're spending less than our annual allocation, aren't we? And therefore making inroads into that accumulated deficit. And actually, now that the statutory override's been extended, we should be out of a deficit situation by the end of that period, by 2028. Some of the other upper tier authorities have got massive deficits. Now, if my reading of what was in the budget is that they're not going to be written off, but from 28-29, the government will take responsibility back. But that doesn't mean that the sins of the past will just disappear. And you're right, it will be top sliced from the DSG and affect the funding available for mainstream education. And that's a less positive outcome that will have implications for Medway. Did that make sense?
Thank you. Just on income stream.
Well, I can have a go, Phil, and then we'll see where we go, can't we? I think in terms of income streams, I mean, obviously we're straying into the next budget item or the next budget item after. So in terms of relating to this budget item, income streams, obviously the fees and charges have been set, so we're unlikely to kind of increase those in year. Phil has got a delegation that he could do, but I don't think you're minded to, or none have been brought to your attention to this point. So those other income streams in terms of fees and charges will remain the same and are reflected within, and it's really difficult to pick it out in terms of the body because they're contained within the kind of the service budget, so you can't really see with any clarity that those kind of income budgets now they're performing against, but we would have, if there were kind of significant variances, we'd have explained those in the kind of narrative. And as the funding side on the grant table suggests, that we're all kind of forecasting that will all come in as per the budget as well. So maybe that's a question in terms of income streams for the budget item to come as well. We can maybe pick up at that point.
Thank you, Dave. Any other member? Vice Chair. We have a recommendation on page 57.
Yeah. Okay. I move the recommendations at page 57. The committee notes the results of the second round of revenue budget monitoring for 25-26, and in particular the risk to interest and financing projections. B, the committee notes that Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full council.
Thank you. Is that supported? Councillor Prenter is agreed. Thank you. And that brings us on to agenda item 8, Capital Budget Monitoring Round 2, 2025-2026. I will now ask the Head of Corporate Accounts, Andy McNally Johnson, to introduce the report. Andy.
Thanks, Chair. I'll keep this brief. The report presents the results of the second round of capital monitoring. These have been presented to Cabinet on the 18th of November and forecast both the current year and outturn and future years until the completion of each scheme. The result of the second round of monitoring overall for the authority is a projected overspend against total budget, that's of 58,000 against a total budget of 230 million. That's across the council, but the schemes within the remit of this committee, you notice it's quite a small budget, projected to complete within budget. And I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Andy. I've got Councillor Lammers and then Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to this report and also follows on from some discussion that started in the last report that kind of bled over. And it's this question about assumptions. Given that there's projected overspends in both capital and also the revenue budget that we discussed earlier, and there was a lot of discussion about the assumptions that were made at the planning stage and the setting, and assumptions being overly optimistic. What were the optimistic assumptions, and why do you think that this optimism was misguided? And how can we ensure that when we go through the process in setting the budget for next year, that optimism, perhaps it may have been new Labour government turning on the taps, plugging gaps that were historically there. Now that optimism is eroding, can we be more sensible going forward?
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Andy, would you like to respond?
So I'll talk about the overspend, although they're not directly within the remit of this committee. Obviously, those schemes here are not projected to overspend. But what I will say is a general thing with capital schemes, especially when we're talking building schemes, there will quite often be unintended additional costs. That happens, perhaps raw materials increase in value. There may be problems found when building that weren't anticipated, even though contingencies will have been built in. So what I would say, you're always going to have that danger. What I would say is out there, the officers are working with the executive to look at ways of funding any additional variances that there are, and the reports that has gone to Cabinet and will go to the other overview scrutiny committees that take these items certainly have got solutions for these overspends in additional funding, in things like developer contributions, etc. So we will cover that off, but that will come in time, and that will come for the next round of monitoring.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, I do thank you for the answer, Andy, but the question was really about the assumptions that were made, why things were predicted optimistically, and what has not come to bear, to reference what Phil was saying earlier, that there were assumptions made that were over-optimistic. Because I want to ensure that in the next process, that we're much more stricter in what we actually predict that we might get from government, given the reality of the situation and the fact that interest rates have not come down in the way that was perhaps muted by Labour politicians.
Thank you, Councillor Love. Phil, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I'm taking it that the thrust of your question is more on the revenue side than the capital, actually, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in terms of capital schemes, we produce a business case, or the officers produce a business case, they get quantity surveyors involved and give an estimate of what the scheme's going to cost. But I mean, things happen, they find things in the ground, archaeology gets involved, you know, stuff like that. And they're the sort of thing, and whilst you build a contingency in, Medway Council never builds in the kind of Green Book 60% optimism bias, they call it. I don't know, I always think it should be a pessimism bias, but the Green Book calls it an optimism bias. We're never going to build 60% contingencies in, otherwise we'd never do anything. But yeah, there's inevitably things like that. But you see, the overspend on our capital programme isn't significant in the scheme of it. Your question, insofar as it relates to revenue budgets, I mean, the major part of our revenue spend is on those reactive statutory services where we can make a set of assumptions about the demand that's going to come through, the unit costs that we're going to be paying, but that so many factors impact that. So if you take adult social care, for example, the financial pressures that are impacting on the NHS and the imperatives that the hospital has to discharge can then dramatically impact on social services. And if you take, I mean, temporary accommodation, we base our forecasts on a sort of trajectory over a period of time. And actually, in terms of the numbers of families coming into temporary accommodation, the overall numbers have remained fairly flat. The unit costs might change, but the numbers have remained fairly flat over a number of years. This year, they've just gone through the roof. You know, I mean, again, it's probably a question that's worth posing to the relevant officers at the specific committee meeting. But, you know, we made a set of assumptions that at the time were perfectly reasonable. In terms of temporary accommodation, as a for instance, they've just caught us by surprise.
Thank you, Chair. Just finally, in the assumptions, was it assumed that to borrow £1 million you'd be paying £80,000 to do so? Was that assumption baked into the workings, or is that a disappointment?
When we set our interest and financing budget, we do take into account the forecast spend profile for our capital programme, because that's the significant part of our borrowing. I mean, if you look at the £500 million that we borrow, over 85% of it is directly associated with our capital programme. In setting the budget for this year, we did make assumptions. So those that have heard me and Andy discuss this at Audit Committee will know that we made assumptions that interest rates would start to reduce, and I've been taking borrowing short term so that I was poised to respond to that. Now, the interest rate, the Bank of England rate, has reduced. but that hasn't manifested in a reduction in the PWLB rates. So again...
Thank you, Chair, for the clarity.
Does that help? Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
I'm always surprised that government doesn't realise the impact of its policies on and how that ripples through everything we do. But anyway, I'll ask some simple questions. Well,
through the chair, please, Councillor Brenton.
Councillor President, I'm just stating the facts. They're not political. They're facts.
Members.
Yep. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lawrence.
I've just got a couple of simple questions on the ICT. Sorry to pick on you, Paul. It's noted in the report that the flooring works have been delayed. That seems to have been going on for a very long time. Can you just assure us that there is no operational risk for the flooring project being delayed? And can you just give us an idea of when the flooring project's going to be finished?
Yeah, I was in there last week, so it's pretty much done. So the delay was caused by, if you remember the data centre, as you walked in, the servers are on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side is when we used to have big servers where technology's shrunk. So that area to the left has now been converted into the CCTV control room, so we can relocate Kindy. So while that work was going on, the work paused, but they've gone up to the wall. I'm pretty sure it's complete now.
Right, okay. But my point is that it does seem to have taken a very long time. I think 2 years ago, you and I was in the data centre and the work was underway then. But okay, more of a strategic question on the ICT capital adequacy. So obviously we're coming to the end of a very big programme, but as we all know, IT does not stand still. And given our focus on actually digitising ever more of the council services, I'm really surprised there's no budget for the future. Now, this is one of the challenges when we decide to do in-service, and I agree, actually, I think the in-service is the right route, as long as we properly fund it. If you go into someone else's data centre, they handle all the infrastructure. So I'm just wondering, please assure me that we are thinking about replacing equipment and making sure that if we do go down this digitisation route, we've got the infrastructure to support it. And I think one more point on that is really around the cyber risk. That's ever growing, and you know, what physical equipment do we need to make sure that we stay one step ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Paul, would you like to respond?
Yeah, so that I can give you that reassurance. So we've produced a forward-looking 5-year plan for the capital strategy to look at what we would need, and that does include both the infrastructure within the data centre itself, the infrastructure at Gunwharf and our other sites, because the networking is always improving, and to get those better speeds, to look at that refresh, alongside making those right decisions about should it be in the data centre, should it be hosted in the cloud, because there are advantages to that. So we are sticking to that hybrid approach to get the best of both worlds.
Chair, just on that, Paul, when you and I talked about this, I thought there was a really good opportunity for us to be earning a lot of income from the data centre. It's a big space. And I know from the days when, one server would have been like this size, they're now like this. And we've got a lot of, not dead space, but we've got a lot of space. Have we made any efforts in terms of trying to generate more revenue above what we already have? Thank you, Chair.
So the competition, I suppose, for us is the cloud, and we have seen organisations move to Amazon Web Services and Azure. However, part of doing the flooring, the difference it makes to the data centre, so bringing potential clients down, seeing a nice, fresh, new flooring, secure racking. We've got the MOJ now, are obviously on site using that space. So we do have a product to sell, not just the infrastructure. It just looks nicer to sell it with the CCTV next door. So yeah, we are actively promoting that as a revenue stream for us.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for your question, Councillor Lawrence. Councillor Huckwell.
Thank you, Chair. Now, although I appreciate this is not in the remit of this committee because we've only got a very small amount of capital, as it's in the report, can you tell me why we've got nearly £1 million difference between the round one forecast and the round two? We were £850,000 underspent in round one, and now we're 58,000 overspent. What significantly has changed that that we didn't know about in round one.
Okay, so with round one, that was a specific issue that had happened where we found that there was a reason why there was an underspend, and that money was used to assist with other schemes. So that brought us back into budget. But obviously since then, and these things come to light, as we say, there have been issues on other schemes, albeit smaller, and mainly within children and adults, to do with a particular school where there is just some additional work that's had to be done. That was just found out. That's just timing, a bit as Phil alluded to. As schemes move along, things will be found. They weren't known at round one, obviously, but we'll report them as we find them, really. But it's a moving feast, and I think what we're trying to do as things come to light, we'll report them, and they'll be dealt with either by looking at whether we can find additional funding, or if funding's available that can be used elsewhere, then that will sometimes come down to directors under delegated powers to be able to use that to help other schemes, and I think that's what happened in round one.
Thank you, Andy. Would you like to come back?
I understand they used the money for something else that wasn't in the capital budget.
Thank you. Any other member? Just one from me, then before we go to the Vice Chair. I just Just what's funding is included in the capital program in terms of contingency for unexpected overrun or delays. I couldn't see in a line with regards to contingency in that.
So are you talking when schemes are about what would be brought in as a contingency? Is that what we're saying, when schemes are brought forward as part of a business case? Are you talking about specific?
Yeah. Sorry, Phil touched on the risk in one of his response earlier, and that just brought to mind, do we have any contingency built in the capital program?
I think there's a wide-ranging capital program, but I think the biggest risks there will be are within building, where there's building schemes that are going on. And I think probably that, if you're looking, and again, not within the remit of this committee hugely, but we're talking probably where we're looking at school places and we're building classrooms and we're adding bits and pieces onto schools, there will be potential risk there as come to light, as you'll see with that overspend. And I think that's something that we're very aware of when business plans are brought there. We'll look and say, does that seem a reasonable contingency? And those that you know, within children and adults, for example, in this case, that regularly do this will have a good idea of the sort of reasonable levels of contingency that may or may not need to be built in. It wouldn't need to be for each particular scheme. It would just depend on the type of scheme. Does that make sense?
No, I think what we're saying, there isn't a general contingency in the capital programme. So every single scheme, when it's added to the programme, you know, some are added at the beginning of the year, aren't they? But there's others that will bring a business case to Cabinet and then to Council during the year to add something to the programme. Now that business case will identify what the scheme's going to cost and will make a provision for contingency. But it will vary depending on what the perceived risks of that particular scheme will be.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's clarified. Scheme by scheme basis. Fast Chair. 100%. Fast Chair.
Okay. I move the recommendation at page 65. The committee is asked to note the results of the second round of capital budget monitoring for 25-26.
Is that seconded? Councillor Jones, is that agreed? Great. That brings us on to agenda item 9. Item 9 is the draft capital and revenue budget. I'll ask the head of revenue accounts, Dave Reynolds, to introduce the report. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so again, this report was reported to Cabinet on 18th of November and sets out the draft capital and revenue budgets for 2026-27. In terms of the revenue budget, it reflects overall growth in the budget requirement of 40.942 million, income growth of 33.279 million, and also reflects no use of EFS, which we had budgeted for 18.184 million in 25-26. Now, those three things combined give an overall budget gap of 25.847 million. The tables in the report for the Directorate provide some more detail about the nature of the pressures and savings that have been built into the draft budget at this stage. Work is ongoing to reduce the overall budget gap before the proposed budget is taken to Cabinet and then Council in February. The committee is asked to comment on the proposals outlined in the draft capital and revenue budgets within the remit of this committee. Just to further say that last week MHCLG kind of released a local government finance policy statement that covers the 2026, 27 to 28, 29, and alongside that also published a comprehensive response to the fair funding consultation. It's fair to say that in that policy statement there were more changes than we expected. I won't go into them now, but obviously we'll pick that up through questions as we go. Probably leave it there as in terms of an introduction and take questions.
Thank you, Dave. Councillor Lammers.
Thank you, Chair. My first question related to the statement that only modest additional resources have come forward, so it's not possible to determine with any confidence that future funding streams the Council can expect can be relied upon. But given that we touched on expectations earlier, I'll skip that and go to my second question, Chair, which relates to increasing pay for staff. Given that staff got a 5% pay rise 24, another 5% the year after, and now earmarked for another 3%, does the Council have a policy whereby it is assumed that all pay staff will always get pay increases year on year on year? Because, you know, just in this report, the predicted cost is over £4 million. These things, you know, are significant and do add up. So that's my first question on staff pay. My second question relates to the adult social care budget requirement. It's noted on page 74, section 7.2.1, that the Council is legally obligated to provide care for all eligible individuals regardless of payment status. Of course, that's mandated by law, but I would like the Council's opinion on to what extent the quality of that provision is mandated by law, because there are some examples where people in extremely expensive care homes remain in expensive care homes at the cost of the general taxpayer, and they're not relocated to cheaper care homes. So that could be a potential cost saving. I'm not advocating that, but I'm just asking what the Council's policy on that. And then my final question, Chair, relates to EHCPs. So page 76, 7.5.2 says, due to the doubling of requests for needs assessments, it is necessary to invest in additional staffing to meet the statutory SEND assessment timeframes with a projected cost of over £1 million. Now, I was very clear with the Council when they introduced the London banding system, whereby they removed the ability for school teachers to request the additional 6k top-up funding for special needs children. They had to get an EHCP to mandate their needs, and that qualified them for either 2k or 4k or 6k. I said to them, this will have the effect of a huge spike in demand for EHCPs, and staffing will need to be increased as a result if you're going to do that. I was assured it wouldn't. So given that my concerns were proven to be correct, is the Council sure that the money that they're saving on introducing banding for EHCPs in line with the special measures programmes that were put on is actually saving the Council money? Now at the back end, they're having to invest more to fix a problem that they created. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Dave, would you like to respond?
I'll certainly respond to the first question. Some of the others might fall into the remits of other ONSs, so it might be more appropriate that you take that question there, or get one of your colleagues to ask the question on your behalf at that meeting. Certainly in terms of pay, the administration does have a stated ambition that kind of pay would always increase in line with inflation. Having been through the Medpay process, I don't think we want to kind of go back and lose the kind of gains that we've made in terms of kind of increasing people's the kind of the reward and recognition kind of, and certainly the retention aspects of kind of people's pay packages. But in simple terms, there's no actual policy around kind of a specific kind of inflation, increase in line with inflation, but it is certainly the stated ambition of the administration as we stand. And sorry, I won't go into the kind of the adult social care ones and the EHCP question in any detail, but I mean that they are kind of valid questions that I'm sure we can tackle in the appropriate meeting.
Chair, given that I cannot challenge them in other committees, given that we are a small group and afforded very limited opportunities to ask questions, I wonder if Phil might pick up on this, because the costs related to care home provisions for people that cannot pay...
Point of order, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Lammers, EHCP is for children and
Chair,
young people,
these
ONS.
figures are directly referenced in the report that we're reading, and the costs attributed to increase of 1 million is directly referenced in the report for this committee. So you're saying that figures and points quoted in the report for this committee is not relevant and in scope?
No, it's not for this committee. Yes, absolutely, it's not.
I find that very strange.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you. I've seen this mistake made in a lot of committees where councillors come and ask the wrong committee the wrong question. But
We're not on the other committees.
Well, that's not. You need more councillors.
Through the chair, please.
Sorry,
Councillor
Chair.
Lawrence.
Sorry, yeah. Chair, just on the business support draft budget, we're making lots of savings from Medway 2.0, which...
March.
Oh, is it March? Right, okay, yeah. For next year. So Medway 2.0 is showing some savings in, not massive savings, but there are some savings. But given we did that 2 years ago, we put a big chunk of savings in, it didn't really materialise. I was just wondering how certain we are that we are going to achieve those savings. Is there things that you're doing now that you know are going to come to fruition for next financial year, and therefore these aren't sort of finger in the air type things? You know that they're going to be done and you will actually achieve them. That's just my only question. The only other question, Phil, just on the layout. These reports, there's a lot of numbers in, but what I find really difficult is there's no comparison to the current year. It would be nice to have the first column being the current year budget. So everything is like 26, 27, 26, 27, and I'm going, well, what do we spend, you know, without having to go back and find that budget or find that report? It's difficult to know what the actual movement is. I know there's this adjusted base budget, which is 31 million, which is, I imagine, where we are at, we are now, but I just find it difficult to read this. Anyway, there's only a comment.
Thank you. Would you like to respond, Phil?
In terms of the layout, I mean, it's evolved over a number of years, and there was a time where this committee and other committees were saying that they didn't like the appendices. They didn't like the tables as appendices. Now, that obviously, when it's an appendix, we can convert it to landscape, and there's room for more columns. And I think if you go back a few years, you would have seen versions of this where the outturn is in a column and it's wider. In order to accommodate the committee's wishes that we build the tables into the actual report itself, we've had to lose something. I mean, we can think
I'll just make
about
it as a comment.
Presentation.
Yeah.
All right,
I mean, the council's so much better.
board.
The council's so much better because I'm here now, you see, and I can ask these questions. But it would be nice to know that what we're budgeted to spend this year, what the change is, and then what we're likely to be spending in next year. Thank you. Anyway.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you for your response, Phil. Councillor Prenter.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's wise to put in a budget prudency that there will be pay rises, and the only metric you can use is potentially will be inflation. But I'm more disappointed in Councillor Lammers that he doesn't want to give his staff, doesn't want to give the people of Medway who work for Medway Council a cost of living pay rise, because he doesn't obviously believe that we should pay our staff to retain them so we can provide the services for Medway people.
Thank you for your question or comment, Councillor Printer. Would you like to respond, Dave?
I don't think there's anything to respond to there.
Any other member? Point of order, Councillor Lawrence. What's your point of order? Councillor Lammers.
Sorry, point of order. Given that my questions on SCND and the other question related to a report authored by the gentleman here, why is it not appropriate for him to answer questions on the report given the detail he wrote in the report himself?
It's not for this committee. The report will go to every other ONS committee, and that question is not for this committee. Thank you, Councillor. Phil, would you like to respond?
Sorry. Just to say, we did have a briefing session earlier in the week where we were quite clear about the remit of the committees and what questions we would expect to be asked at each committee.
There is a difference between rules and conventions and traditions. I have to maximise the opportunities as a council.
Councillor Lammers, through the chair, please.
Yeah, I totally understand it. You know, we've provided you a report. It's made reference to those things, and I can understand why you've asked the question about it. I think what we're really saying to you is the people that can answer that question most effectively are not around this table. That's the problem. I mean, is there a version of this where we bring the two directors along to BSD as well as their other committees? I don't know, but you know, we won't be able to answer the sort of question about. I mean, your first question is around the quality of care. That really is something for the assistant director and the director of the service to answer. And in terms of similarly, you said the impact on the volume of EHCPs coming through. Again, the assistant director would be better placed to answer it. So I think that's the point. We can't do justice to the question.
I do appreciate that, Chair. I really do appreciate it. It's just that given that these particular things are mentioned as specific examples of cost increases and that they're noted as significant, that's why they're in the report, it would seem strange to me that the author of the report would not speak to the detail contained in their own report. But I do appreciate the scope limitations.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Steve, would you like to comment?
Just to add, obviously, business support is the first overview and scrutiny committee to look at it, and part of what we're doing tonight is to forward that to the other committees. So your comments, your questions will form part of the minutes, and obviously the other committees will see that. So that could be something that the assistant director or director addressed on that night.
Thank you, Steve. And Councillor Lammers, are you content with that?
I am content because I knew that was the case. So thank you very much for pointing that out.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. But just on the brief, some of us only got 24 hours notice of that briefing. It came out very, very late, the budget briefing. I think I got an email saying I think you might have been missed off the list. So I'm sure there are some papers from that. If they could be circulated, that would be really useful.
Thank you, Councillor Lammers. Councillor Hackwell, did you want to come in? Councillor Hackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Seeing we've got a gap of nearly 40 million in this budget, of which 18 is currently proposed EFS to reduce that down to 25 or whatever, and EFS is not guaranteed, have we got a plan B to reduce the 41 million?
No.
Got another question as well, but
thank you, Councillor Hackwell. Phil, would you like to respond?
That's a horrible question. No, I haven't got a plan B, but I have been talking to the MHCLG, and EFS remains on the table, and that was actually said in the Chancellor's budget as well. So. Or was it the policy statement? It might have been the policy statement they said it, but EFS does remain on the table, and I am still. I've been in active conversations with the MHCLG since we first requested EFS two years ago.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Hackwell, would you like to come back?
We see that the interest and financing budget projects a £3.5 million increase, of which we know 2.7 million of that is to build a care home that don't really need. What is the rest? The 800,000 or whatever it is of the increase in the finances. Is it just with the general getting the forecast wrong, or do you just think that the interest rates are going to stay up? Or could you just give us some assumptions that you've made to get that 3.5 million?
Thank you. Dave, would you like to respond? No. Andy, would you like to respond?
I'll take that. So when we're putting the interest and financing budget together, we're looking at the need to borrow. We're looking at what we need for the rest of this year, we think, based on capital forecasts. We're looking at what we think we might need to borrow next year, and we're looking at interest rates. All of those assumptions all go together in a fairly comprehensive working to give us those assumptions. So what I'm saying, it's a whole mixture of things that give us that additional projected cost. I know that's not a straightforward thing, but in the sense of an easy answer, but it's a whole raft of different things. And again, we're basing it on what we think likely changes in interest rates will be. What happens when it comes to the point of when we need to borrow is something we'll have to figure out, and that will come out through monitoring next year. We'll also bring our investment strategy, our borrowing strategy as part of the Treasury strategy document that comes forward to Audit Committee in January through to Cabinet and Council in February. And within that, we'll be looking at what is the best way forward, we think, for Medway.
Thank you, Andy. Any other member? Vice Chair.
I move the recommendations at page 69. A, the committee is asked to note that Cabinet has instructed officers to continue to work with portfolio holders in formulating robust proposals to reduce the budget deficit for 26-27 and to liaise with the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to secure support through the Exceptional Financial Support Scheme, should it be necessary. B, the committee is asked to comment on the proposals. Excuse me.
Order,
a bit of
order.
respect, please. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
B, the committee is asked to comment on the proposals outlined in the draft capital and revenue budgets 26-27 and forward proposals to the individual overview and scrutiny committees.
Is that supported? Councillor Nestorov. Is that agreed? That brings us on to agenda item 10, is the work programme. I will ask Steve Dickens, Democratic Services Officer, to introduce the report. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note the changes to the work programme at 4.2.1. Happy to take any questions.
Any member? Vice Chair.
Just waiting to see if I'm going to be interrupted, Councillor Lawrence. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I move the recommendations at page 93. 1.1, the committee is asked to agree the provisional work programme at Appendix 1 to the report. 1.2, the committee is asked to note the work programmes of the other overview and scrutiny committees at Appendix 2 to the report.
Is that seconded? Councillor Jones, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you, and that brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you.